The quiet and calm atmosphere of the logistics center was interrupted only by the hum of the working conveyor machines. Our main character, Mikhail, was a new employee of this center. Trying to relieve the boredom, he tried to strike up a conversation with the robot, discussing his past, but the robot didn't care about him at all. When he took the goods and left, leaving the guy alone, Mikhail couldn't help but sigh in disappointment. Right there, another robot exactly the same drove up to him and asked him to clear the way. The hero silently fulfilled his request and stepped back a little. He couldn't help but admit that he was weighed down by the complete absence of the human warmth that was so familiar to him. The logistics center was a quiet, closed place, where almost only robots worked. Mikhail involuntarily even began to think that this was simply not his place. It all started a few months ago when he just returned from the army. To his great regret, the joy of returning home was short-lived. The boy's parents called to tell him that they had moved to another place, and that he now had to live alone in a rented apartment. At first, Mikhail did not experience any financial problems. During his service, he managed to accumulate some money. For these reasons, the guy was in no hurry to find a job and spent all his days reading various exciting novels. But at some point, this carefree life came to an end, and he still had to look for work. Mikhail had high hopes of working in the nearest cafeteria, but he was turned down there without even a chance. Thus, a whole month passed in endless refusals, and the hero's hopes for a happy future melted away right before his eyes. He discussed all his failures with his family, and one day, in a joke thrown by his sister, he saw an opportunity. This is how our hero ended up in this job. The man who approached him pulled him out of his memories of the past. It was the manager Pavel. He asked Mikhail to go to the warehouse and check the remaining supplies. The hero could not refuse this assignment, so with a forced smile he headed towards the warehouse. He simply couldn't stand his manager. Even the robots treated him better than Pavel. Once in the warehouse, Mikhail began to look through the shelves in search of boxes of cans of tuna. It took him a long time because they found themselves at the very back of the room. As he walked downstairs with the box, the hero complained about the smart guy who had stuffed this product onto the very top shelf, but a sudden quiet creak caught his attention. As soon as he looked towards the door, it suddenly slammed shut. Mikhail immediately ran to the door and began desperately tugging at the handle, trying to open it, but it was tightly locked. Trying not to panic, he dialed the manager, but Pavel's phone was unavailable. The hero took a deep breath and suggested that he could still call the emergency services. But he quickly dismissed the idea, as he did not want to put the manager in an awkward position. Deciding to wait a little, he informed his older sisters about the situation he found himself in. Soon after, Emma, the eldest of them, called him. Mikhail had just answered the call when he heard a strange sound, and the next moment the center building was shaken by a strong earthquake. When the emergency lights came on, the hero was perplexed, but it quickly turned to horror when a warning sounded about the danger and a request to leave the premises. The hero desperately pounded on the door and screamed to be let out, hoping that someone would hear him. He quickly realized that no one would help him, and without thinking, he dialed the emergency number. But unfortunately for him, the signal in the storage room completely stopped working. With each passing moment, Mikhail became increasingly afraid and panicked. The situation became even worse when a couple of deep dents appeared on the door from the impact. The hero slowly unclenched his trembling hand and let go of the handle. He felt with all his gut that he would die that very moment if he made even one sound. When all the sounds outside died down, Mikhail fell exhausted to the floor. He didn't know what to do next. He spent the next 3 days in the warehouse, eating supplies. During all this time, no one came for him, so he assumed that something serious had happened. To somehow relieve the boredom, he kept notes on his phone. And now he was writing another note when suddenly a strange system window appeared in front of him. The message said that he had access to a level 1 self-subspace skill. Mikhail decided that over these 3 days he had completely gone crazy, and now could not distinguish fantasy from reality. So, out of pure curiosity, he decided to move the entire order fulfillment center into this space. But he had no idea that this would actually happen. The center literally evaporated into thin air, and now the guy found himself outside among a mountain of debris. He looked around in shock, barely comprehending what was happening. There was destruction everywhere, and nearby Mikhail noticed Pavel lying motionless. He was dead. This whole terrible situation, which resembled a bad dream, made the hero feel ill. No matter how hard he tried, his head just couldn't wrap its head around everything that was happening. The footsteps heard behind him made him tense up, not allowing him to come to his senses. After this, Mikhail noticed a huge shadow hanging over him. A gigantic ogre stopped a step away from him. The hero froze, trying to suppress the growing panic. He escaped himself in the fact that it was just a huge bear. But as soon as the monster stepped closer, the hero ran away with loud cries for help. His heart was pounding as if it was about to burst out of his chest as the ogre rushed after him. Mikhail ran without looking where he was going, praying that this nightmare would finally end. Therefore, when the system offered him to enter the created space, he agreed without hesitation. At that very moment, the ogre raised his paw to strike. But our hero entered the portal before the monster could catch up with him, so he was moved to a safe space. The ogre tried furiously to break through, but to no avail. Michael was shocked when the drone informed him that without his permission, no living creature would be able to enter or exit this space. At the sight of the familiar drone, the thought flashed through the guy's head that this simply couldn't be. To confirm his guess, he looked around. The entire logistics center where he worked was moved here. As a reward for his first entry into the subspace, our hero received a magic stone, which immediately materialized in his hands. The furious blow to the ogre's invisible wall prevented the guy from taking a closer look at the stone. Mikhail was overcome with strong doubts that the monster would not be able to get here, but the robot convinced him that this subspace was completely safe. He also explained that thanks to one magic stone, electricity could be maintained here for 24 hours. Michael was very surprised by the fact that now the entire center functioned only on these stones. Suddenly, he noticed that the lights began to go out one by one, plunging the center into darkness. The drone explained that the facility's power supply had been cut off and that a large portion of its production could be damaged as a result. Michael could not allow this to happen in the conditions of the apocalypse that had begun, so he asked the drone how he could get more magic stones. He replied that usually stones are obtained from creatures of another world. At first, the hero was surprised when the conversation turned to otherworldly creatures, but then he turned his gaze to the ogre, realizing that he had no other choice. After handing the stone over to the drone, he asked it to keep the center running. He was also interested in whether he had access to all the items in this center. Sometime later, he was carefully sorting through the box of weapons. It was dangerous to approach the ogre, so the hero decided that axes and throwing knives would be the best option. His initial goal was not to kill the monster, but to inflict serious injury on it. So the first axe he threw sank into the ogre's neck. But no matter how many weapons Mikhail threw, he was unable to cause significant harm. The hero simply did not know what else to do, because he did not have enough strength for a normal injury. Besides, the only weapon he had left was an axe. Without raising his head, he asked the robot to check how many more of these axes were left in the warehouse. At that time, he was thinking about what else he could throw at the ogre to injure it, but the number he heard left Michael perplexed. When he and the robot walked into the warehouse, he saw that the entire floor was littered with axes. The drone explained that all items here could be duplicated. This way, even if something breaks or gets lost, it will never run out. The hero could hardly believe that this center had an endless supply of literally everything. But this freed his hands and freed him from the need to think about how to use resources more economically. The drone also revealed that Mikhail can automatically send weapons beyond subspace, rather than throwing them himself. Having received detailed instructions on how to do this, the boy cast a thoughtful glance at the box of axes. The first such attack managed to knock the ogre off his feet. Michael turned his stunned gaze to the drone, asking what the attack speed was. He reported that he could only reach a speed of 60 kilometers per hour at the moment. He also said that thanks to magic stones, our hero can increase the speed of delivery. Michael looked at the body of the slain ogre for a long time, thinking about these words. And then he asked the drone to provide him with some things. So he changed his worker's suit for more comfortable hiking clothes. Having received the map, Mikhail immediately unfolded it on the floor. He singled out several areas that interested him most one by one. He wanted to reach his relatives using the route he had built. It would have taken too long to cover such a distance on foot, so he was primarily concerned with this issue. The bicycle was a great option because it was much quieter and less noticeable. So, with the hope that his family was okay, he left the subspace. After half an hour, Mikhail had killed 12 more ogres. During this time, he managed to understand that his ability was incredibly useful when fighting monsters. When the ogre attacked, the hero immediately opened the subspace and jumped inside. Thus, he managed to escape from the strong clutches of the enemy. He then used another of his abilities, delivery, and wounded the ogre. The wounded monster began to fight its way inside with even greater zeal. But hearing a rustle, he turned away from Mikhail and looked back. Right before his eyes, the axe was pulled back into the portal. The hero was able to kill him only on the second try. Although he didn't understand how it all worked, he really liked the attraction function. Thanks to this, he didn't need to pull the stones out of the monsters himself. They could be attracted. At this point, Mikhail already had 13 of these stones. The second thing our hero learned was that besides ogres, other terrible creatures appeared in this world. Although he didn't know what kind of monsters they were, Mikhail was sure that it wouldn't be easy to kill them. Suddenly, he heard someone's loud cry for help, and he turned around sharply. At the same time, Greg was running away from danger with all his might. But the winged lizard caught up with him in a couple of moments and snapped its teeth dangerously as it flew over the man. With one blow of its tail, the snake knocked Greg off his feet, knocking the last of his strength out of him. Joshua immediately ran up to his friend. He was about to help him, when suddenly the same snake dropped down on its hind legs next to him. The man froze in place in horror, thinking that he was about to be eaten, but instead the monster turned on his friend. Joshua was shocked and had no idea what to do in this situation. With his ordinary knife, he could do absolutely nothing to such a dangerous enemy, but suddenly a bright flash blinded him. And the next moment, a lightning attack knocked the snake off its feet. Greg, who had already said goodbye to his life, was stunned. Joshua couldn't believe that someone could actually kill such a monster with an ordinary axe. A little later, Mikhail, covered in blood, drove up to them. Because of his fighting skills and uniform, the men mistook the hero for a military man. Bowing hastily, they sincerely thanked the boy for saving their lives. The hero pointed to the logistics center emblem on the bike and said that he was not a soldier, but an ordinary worker. But the men no longer cared whether he was a military man or not, because he had simply fantastic skills. Joshua admitted that he too had awakened a skill, but it was only a pitiful driving ability. Greg, on the other hand, had no abilities at all, which he cheerfully reported. Later, the man said that there was practically no one left in that block. The small number of workers from the centers that were here were almost all killed by monsters. Mikhail focused his attention on the information about the survivors who were now isolated in Block E. Suddenly, one of the men suggested that the hero go with them to a place protected from monsters, but the hero was overcome with doubts about whether he should do this. He didn't trust them, but he needed information about what was happening around him. Therefore, after much deliberation, Mikhail decided to accept their offer. In case of danger, he was going to simply go into his subspace. But immediately upon arriving at the safe zone, he had the chance to witness how Thomas single-handedly brought down an ogre with only a pitchfork. What he saw made an indelible impression on him and made him fear this man. Greg immediately rushed forward, concerned for the well-being of everyone else. Thomas said that it was only thanks to his quick reaction that everyone survived. He didn't know how the monster had gotten in here, but he assumed the ogre had managed to slip in while everyone was distracted. This incident was enough to make our hero doubt the safety of this place. Suddenly, everyone's attention turned to Mikhail. Greg told his comrades about how this boy saved him and Joshua from the wyvern. After hearing this story, everyone immediately clung to him. One after another, they happily thanked and praised Mikhail for the help he had provided. Feeling very confused, the hero tried to convince them that he had done nothing special. Here Joshua came to his aid. Then one of the men told Mikhail that they had all been working together for more than 10 years and were already one big family. It was Thomas, who was the general manager of the express terminal. He once again expressed his gratitude for saving his two comrades. The man suggested that Michael stay in the shelter and have a good rest. He assured him that they had enough supplies for everyone, and if they ran out, they could get more. At this point, Joshua reported that the logical center was no longer there. It had simply evaporated into thin air. This news fell like a heavy burden on everyone's heart. Thomas noticed how the excitement began to grow among the people. They all found it difficult to believe what had happened. Watching this, our hero felt a bit of guilt, but did not dare to tell the truth. Thomas quickly took control of the situation and suggested speeding up the process of clearing the tunnel. Many supported this decision, as they wanted to return to their families as soon as possible. Mikhail didn't understand what they were talking about, so he decided to ask Thomas. He said that they have a large number of vehicles that will help them get to their families, but all accessible roads and highways are either destroyed or blocked, so their only option was a tunnel to the west, inhabited by a flock of wyverns. Thomas also said that the hero does not have to go with them on such a dangerous mission. Mikhail also needed normal transport, so he decided to help them get rid of the wyverns. But he was still wary of them and had no intention of showing his ability. He also noted that these people also did not tell him everything about the supplies. Interrupting the ongoing discussion, Mikhail said that he could go into the tunnel himself and see how many monsters had appeared there. Earlier, after killing several ogres, additional skills were unlocked for him. He was pleasantly surprised that all skills could be developed by leveling up, but magic stones were required. Now our hero planned to take advantage of the opportunity and get more of the stones he needed. But everything didn't go according to his plan at all. He was not allowed to go alone and Joshua was sent with him. The man explained that Mikhail would not have been able to cope alone, given that he did not know the road at all. Changing the subject, the hero asked if Joshua would be able to use his ability on a bicycle. When he replied that he had an idea of how to operate a vehicle, Mikhail began to feel apprehensive. So, under cover of night, they set off on their journey. The hero's bad feeling came true. Joshua was riding his bike at high speed in a very strange and unsafe position. The man justified this by saying that there were too many cars on the road, and this way he could see them better. Suddenly he shouted out that there was a wyvern ahead, and asked what they should do. But Mikhail could not answer him, because he could not see anything behind his back. A couple of meters ahead, the silhouette of a monster was indeed visible behind one of the cars. The confused man turned to his partner, asking if he should continue driving. Along with Michael's shout for him to look ahead, a sudden attack came flying towards the wyvern. Joshua was completely perplexed, but he didn't ask any questions. While pulling the stone into his subspace, the hero asked Joshua not to look back under any circumstances. Soon the man reported that they had almost reached the tunnel. Almost immediately he stopped for reasons unknown to the hero, but Mikhail didn't have time to ask about these very reasons. A creature appeared behind him, which became the answer to the question. They were completely surrounded by winged lizards. Joshua was frozen with horror, realizing that they would not be able to escape and reach safety. He had already come to terms with the fact of his death when the monster approached them. At this moment, Mikhail decided to reveal his ability. He had no other choice. Watching the guy give some commands to the system, Joshua asked in confusion what he was doing. Immediately, two monsters suddenly jumped from their places. Joshua cowered, expecting to feel the lizard's teeth on himself, but the sudden attack knocked him off his feet. When Mikhail said that there was no longer a threat, the man looked back and asked, confused, what had happened. The next moment he froze in place in shock. Behind our hero was the missing logistics center. Michael asked him not to go far away so that he could protect them both. The amazed man had no choice but to agree. They had no time for further conversation. They were attacked by another winged lizard. But he barely managed to reach Joshua when an axe flew at his head. The death of another fellow enraged the other monsters. Another monster aimed at Joshua, but suddenly a portal to subspace appeared in front of him. This caused them both to be thrown in different directions. Immediately another monster flew into the sky. Without thinking, Mikhail threw an axe at him, but the monster easily dodged. Joshua was overcome with horror and concern for the boy. Literally, at the last moment, he deftly jumped into his subspace, hiding from the monster. Immediately after this, he was struck down with an axe. The man was amazed by what he saw, from the battle axes to the logistics center. Although he didn't understand everything yet, he was firmly convinced that for this guy, monsters were not a problem at all. Joshua even began to envy the hero's ability, because then he would be able to easily get to his family. Suddenly, they noticed the last lizard escape. The man watched the retreating figure with confusion, and then he noticed how a shining stone flew out of the body of the killed monster. Now Mikhail was surprised when his partner asked him about this stone. This was the first time Joshua heard that his abilities could be improved with the help of these stones. Mikhail understood why the man had not taken the stone from the ogre earlier, and assumed that their abilities worked differently. The man expressed his admiration, jokingly saying that with such an ability, the hero would easily get rid of the tunnel monsters. Without rushing to answer, Mikhail looked away. The man's gaze immediately changed when he realized that he had hit the mark. The hero explained to him that at first he just wanted to inspect the tunnel, and then quickly sort everything out. Feeling guilty, Joshua apologized for ruining his plans. Mikhail decided not to focus on this, and suggested returning as soon as possible. The man followed his back with a thoughtful look, and asked what the end point of his journey was. When I heard that Mikhail was going to Gangnam, I was very surprised. In doubt, he asked the hero to go with him because his house was right on the way to Gangnam. Mikhail did not expect such a sudden request, and could not hide his surprise. Joshua explained that he was no fighter, and would not be able to get home safely if he only knew how to drive. So he suggested that they join forces since their paths converged. The man gave many more reasons why they should do this, but Mikhail no longer listened to him. He had no doubts about Joshua's driving skills, so the offer seemed tempting to him. The hero also understood that he would not be able to hide his abilities from others for long. He didn't know how they would react, and whether they would force him to do something against his will through various threats. For these reasons, Joshua, who decided to risk himself and go with him, was the best option. The man's face lit up with happiness when Mikhail accepted his offer, but the hero set a condition that he would clear the tunnel alone, and others would interfere with him. Joshua readily promised to take on the matter. He assured Mikhail that no one would be stubborn if he asked his friends not to interfere. Immediately upon arriving at the shelter, Joshua announced to everyone that they would be able to get out of here through the tunnel. He said that thanks to his secret ability, the hero would handle everything himself, and they would just need to wait outside. Mikhail couldn't even imagine that Joshua would tell him everything so directly. Many simply did not believe such nonsense and demanded details of this plan. With each passing moment, the situation became more and more dangerous for our hero. So, before things got too bad, he decided to take matters into his own hands and assured that the tunnel would be cleared tomorrow morning. Mikhail understood that his words sounded unconvincing, but there was no other way out. Thomas, who had stepped forward, decided not to ask the hero about his abilities, because he saw no point in it. The man also promised not to interfere with him, but also put forward his own condition. Afterwards, one of the men lowered a box full of supplies in front of Mikhail. The hero tried to refuse all this, but Thomas interrupted him, saying that this was all they could do to help in this situation. In this way, Each of them expressed their gratitude for the help provided. Michael was completely confused and again tried to convince them that this was not at all necessary. But this time Joshua stopped him, asking him to simply accept this gift. When he said that their families were waiting for them somewhere, the hero involuntarily thought about his loved ones, whom he so wanted to visit. Soon, all the alcohol available was dragged out from the hiding place. Everyone decided to put their worries and fears aside and just enjoy the penultimate evening here. In the morning, as had been decided, Mikhail went into the tunnel alone for reconnaissance. Although some still had doubts, they decided to trust the guy completely. Finding himself at the entrance to the tunnel, the guy immediately noticed a pack of monsters living there. A thoughtful look involuntarily appeared in his gaze. He remembered his childhood, the time when he constantly fought with his sister. She always denied and objected to all the accusations he made. Their father always watched their arguments with a slight smile on his face. But he did not give up his attempts to explain how important family is in their world. At such moments, Mother always came with a ladle and demanded help with dinner. Distracted from his own quarrel, Mikhail happily watched his parents, thinking that this is how a family should be. Now, after reconnoitering the tunnel, he sat in the company of his new acquaintances. Everyone laughed and cried with happiness, because very soon they would all return to their families. Very soon the night came into its own. Before the long journey, no one dared to sit up late, so now everyone was saved peacefully. Joshua woke up with a strong thirst, but this desire quickly receded when he noticed that Mikhail was nowhere to be found. The guards at the entrance informed him that some time ago the boy had gone out to get some air. An excited Joshua ran around the entire parking lot looking for him. After a quarter of an hour, he finally managed to find Mikhail near one of the trucks. To the man's worried questions about the reasons for his presence there, the hero replied that he could not sleep. Curious about what he was doing here, Joshua looked inside the cargo bay. What he saw shocked the man. The car was filled with countless boxes. Mikhail explained that he did not fully load the truck to make it easier to drive. The news that this was the last car came as an even bigger shock to Joshua. He could hardly believe that Mikhail had filled all 15 trucks with boxes. The only thing the hero asked was that the man not tell anyone about this. Although the man agreed to keep everything a secret, he did not understand who this guy was, since he was throwing food around so easily. In the morning, as planned, he fought alone against a flock of wyverns. Thanks to the protected subspace, the monsters could not reach our hero. While the system was automatically throwing axes, the hero's thoughts were occupied with a completely different problem. He wanted to place all those people into his subspace, but it was impossible. He had previously discussed this issue with the robot, who advised him to raise the subspace level to the second level. But the crystals he currently had were too few to do this. In addition, the hero understood that the monsters killed in the tunnel would not be enough to achieve his goal. Suddenly, deep in the tunnel, among the monsters flying away, he noticed one motionless figure. This monster was strikingly different from the others. It seemed that his gaze was more than conscious. The rest of them were waiting outside for Mikhail to return all this time. Everyone was tense and worried about the guy. At some point, a guy's figure finally appeared from the tunnel. All his clothes were stained with fresh blood. At the sight of such a terrifying sight, the hearts of many were filled with fear and excitement. As the guy approached, they could see a cheerful smile on his face. Realizing that he was okay, everyone ran towards him with joyful cries. Once the first wave of joy had subsided, it was time for them all to say goodbye. Joshua, on behalf of all his colleagues, thanked Thomas for all the time they spent together and wished him a safe journey home. Here Mikhail awkwardly intervened, saying that he had left a gift in each truck that could be used in case of problems. Joshua smiled, already knowing what was going on, while the others couldn't contain their surprise at the news. Having decided not to linger here any longer, everyone got into their cars and set off. They easily crossed the tunnel and now each went in his own direction. While Joshua kept his eyes on the road, Michael was deep in thought. He couldn't stop thinking about that strange lizard. He even assumed that he could have been the leader of the pack. A sudden sound distracted him from his further thoughts. They entered a half-destroyed city, the silence of which was broken only by the rare cries of monsters. Along the way, we also came across the corpses of wounded soldiers who had fought to the last. It was too hard for Joshua to watch this scene, and Mikhail saw this perfectly well, but it was not in their power to influence anything. He was even afraid to imagine what would have happened to him if he had returned from the army a few months later. Their further journey with Joshua turned out to be impossible due to the blocked road. The man knew that there must be another road here and suggested going along it. But Mikhail, who noticed something, asked him not to hurry. His attention was drawn to bloodthirsty monsters that looked like dogs. Seeing the threat in their faces, Joshua panicked and shouted that he would turn around immediately. But here our hero had a brilliant idea, so he asked his partner if they could drive on the sidewalk. Joshua looked down at the road and answered uncertainly that they had a chance to do it. The hero's smile widened as he confidently said that they would not have to look for another way. Distracted by what was happening outside, Joshua said nothing. The ogre entered into a fight with a pack of hounds, but there were too many enemies and the giants simply could not cope with them all. The hounds furiously tore at his flesh with their teeth. This scene made Joshua, who had turned gray with horror, doubt our hero's idea. But Mikhail was not at all afraid and was completely confident in the success of his plan. Pointing to the net, he asked Joshua to turn the cargo bay toward it. He fulfilled his request by knocking down one of the parts of the fence. The monsters immediately reacted to this sound and were distracted from the torn body of the ogre. Having moved to the cargo bay, Mikhail gave the order to the system to spend all the stones on improving the characteristics of the delivery skill. And then, without a drop of fear, he went straight down to the monsters. A multi-kilogram refrigerator knocked down several hounds at once. Following this, another refrigerator flew out of the truck. In this simple way, the hero was able to get 10 stones at once. Despite the death of their fellows, the hounds stubbornly rushed forward. But they suffered the same unenviable fate. The entire process was automated to the point that Mikhail literally didn't have to do anything. All this time, Joshua watched what was happening through the mirror with genuine horror. He had absolutely no idea what was going on there, and how Mikhail even had enough strength to throw the refrigerator. While the man was trying to put everything together in his head, the hero looked in on him with an offer to have a snack. At that moment, Joshua voiced his crazy assumption that the reserves in the center of packs were endless. Michael confirmed his guess without any hesitation. The man certainly didn't expect such a revelation, and now he didn't even know how to react. So while the system was clearing out the monsters, our heroes were enjoying donuts. Michael thanked Joshua for trusting him and promised to help in the future if needed. When the man said that after crossing the bridge they would have an hour's drive left, a joyful smile appeared on the guy's face. But Joshua couldn't help but worry about his family and hope that they were safe now. Mikhail understood his feelings perfectly. Suddenly he noticed his shabby clothes and said that Joshua could not appear in front of the family like that. Looking in the mirror, he assessed the situation outside and suggested that they look for new clothes in the remaining time. The man couldn't help but chuckle sadly at the thought of Mikhail helping him get dressed. Thus, after some time, his image was radically changed. During this time, all the monsters were destroyed, so Joshua decided not to waste any more time and move on. Turning around in literally an instant, they ran straight down the sidewalk. After crossing the bridge, Joshua asked Michael to hold on tight, and then he rushed forward at full speed. Less than 20 minutes later, they were there. During these few minutes of travel, our hero found himself completely exhausted and devastated. All the houses around were in a terrible state, but there were no corpses anywhere nearby. Now Joshua stood frozen in a daze in front of the door of his own apartment. Mikhail, standing a little further away, understood the man's condition. Joshua was afraid that behind the open door he would see only dead people instead of the family he was in such a hurry to see. A light touch brought the man out of his stupor. The hero said that he could ring the doorbell instead. At first Joshua was confused, but he realized that he simply could not do it himself and gave way to him. In silent tension, Michael walked to the door. Stopping a step away from her, he looked back and asked Joshua to get ready. But before he could answer anything, the door opened itself. The man's eyes were filled with shock and disbelief as he looked up. Before him stood his wife and daughter, alive and completely unharmed. Tears welled up in the woman's eyes and she involuntarily leaned forward. Joshua didn't hesitate to throw himself into the arms of his family. Thanking God that everyone was alive, he burst into tears of happiness like a child. Mikhail watched this scene with a tired smile on his face, not daring to interfere. It was only after a few minutes that Michelle noticed him. Joshua barely had time to imagine his benefactor when everything started to swim before the boy's eyes. Fatigue washed over his body in a sharp wave, so much so that Mikhail didn't even have the strength to stand on his feet. Joshua's terrified cries barely reached his consciousness, which was rapidly slipping away. He dreamed of the past, of his grandmother's funeral. His father did not cry during them, explaining that separation does not always bring only sadness, but also many other emotions. Mikhail did not understand his father's explanation of why he felt grateful at that moment. He saw this, and assured his son that one day he would realize that love is not easy to receive or give. This memory was soon replaced by another fight with his sister. She, with a haughty smile, knocked her brother out with just one blow. Jumping up, Mikhail asked in bewilderment why she was constantly hitting him. The girl grimaced in displeasure, seeing how pampered her brother was. When he ran to complain about everything to his father once again, she only laughed at him, proclaiming her victory. A little later, the whole family gathered together at the dinner table. Kate watched the battle program on TV with delight. To get her attention, Stephen, the eldest of them, smoothly steered the conversation to the topic of her admission to high school. He suggested that she sign up for some boxing club, but the girl had already made up her mind long ago even without this advice. James, on the other hand, was younger and hadn't yet thought about what he might do in high school. But just a couple of years later, this long-awaited moment arrived, and the boy was full of hope. The boys walking nearby caught his attention. His eyes were immediately drawn to their new, ironed school uniforms. He had been wearing his brother's coat, so it was old and worn. But even so, the boy continued to glow with happiness, wanting to see what the school would bring him. All his dreams and expectations were shattered soon enough when he became the target of bullying in high school. Luckily for him, Kate intervened. She also studied at this school and in a couple of years managed to gain a certain authority. It was from that day on that all his school years became like hell. Every morning, Kate put him through the most brutal workouts. In this mode, the years flew by for him unnoticed. One day he received a letter that put an end to his life, which had managed to settle down. It was a notice of enlistment in military service. Mikhail could not influence this in any way, so he soon had to say goodbye to his parents and home. They accompanied him to the very end, but he did not turn around. Perhaps if he had known that he was seeing them for the last time, he would have acted differently. At this moment the hero woke up. He was very surprised and confused when he realized that he was in an unknown place. Anxiety enveloped his heart and thoughts. Trying to act quietly, Mikhail summoned his subspace and pulled out the axe. A voice suddenly heard behind him made him look back. Michelle and Anna, who were having breakfast, watched his actions with surprise. Looking around, the hero immediately discovered Joshua dozing nearby. Breaking the tension, Michelle explained to the guy that he had previously fainted and then fallen asleep, and they did not wake him up. Michael put the hammer away and asked how long he had slept. Michelle replied that no more than 3 hours had passed since then. Afterwards, she thanked him for helping her husband. Feeling awkward, the hero began to convince her that he had done absolutely nothing. Here Joshua himself woke up and sleepily said that Michael saved his life. Michelle knew they both had a lot to discuss, and suggested they have dinner first. The man smiled softly, supporting his wife's opinion. Our hero could not refuse both of them. Soon a plate full of stewed meat and broth was placed in front of him. Mikhail was pleasantly surprised, because he had not eaten home-cooked food for many years. Michelle apologized, saying that she was unable to cook anything else due to a lack of ingredients. But for our hero there was no dish more luxurious than this, so he thanked the woman. Immediately after this, she and her daughter moved to another room, leaving them alone. He was distracted from thinking about why they left by Joshua reminding him about food. Only then did Mikhail lower his gaze and timidly scoop up pieces of meat with a spoon. The very first spoonful spread warmth throughout his entire body. On his tongue there was a real feast of balanced sori and kimchi flavors. He didn't even have time to notice how the plate instantly emptied itself. Mikhail admitted to himself that in recent months, this was the most delicious thing he had eaten. Joshua's sudden words that he would take him to Gangnam surprised the boy. Seeing his bewilderment, the man explained that he had already spoken to his wife and she had supported him. When Mikhail started listing all the risks, he stopped him and said that he understood everything, and he had a couple of conditions. Soon they were outside. Joshua promised to take the hero to Kanma, and after that he would give him an electric bicycle. Although the man understood that the bicycle would not be of much help to him, he could not simply leave his newfound friend. Mikhail was in no hurry to agree, trying to understand the reasons for Joshua's risky decision. Even though he could outrun any monster, the situation was still too dangerous. Besides, he didn't understand why a man would want to be separated from his family again. No matter how hard the hero tried to understand this, he couldn't. So he directly asked Joshua himself. He replied that he owed him his life, and therefore could not remain on the sidelines. Michael still had doubts. Joshua saw this and said that they were all in the same difficult situation, and were holding on only to their families. That's why I thought it would be better if they helped each other. He gave many more reasons why he could be useful on this journey. But the hero no longer listened. He remembered the morning when he had gone alone to clear the tunnel. As he passed one of the cars, he noticed a key left in it. The thought that flashed through my mind at that moment about taking the key and simply leaving was tempting. But he didn't do it. The memory of this brought a faint smile to his face. He interrupted Joshua as he spoke and said that he would have a couple of conditions as well. The first condition was that the man would stay with him until the end, until he met his family. And the second condition was that Joshua take his family with him. Michael promised to protect them by hiding them in his shelter. The man breathed a sigh of relief. Then he cheerfully replied that he would bring his wife and daughter, and they would set off immediately. During Joshua's absence, the hero increased the level of his subspace. Thanks to this, 3 people were able to enter here without hindrance. When they saw the size of the center, all 3 were very shocked. Mikhail called the robot to them and said that it could deliver all the necessary items. Michelle was confused and couldn't believe that he was actually letting them use everything here. But the hero assured her that his supplies were endless, and therefore she could take whatever she wanted. He gave Joshua half an hour to rest with his family, and then they would hit the road. Watching the three of them from the side, he couldn't help but smile. But he decided not to waste time and test his new abilities. But he couldn't even imagine that he would have the opportunity to add another object to the subspace. Moreover, he could even create an entire laboratory here to transform various objects. But since all this required stones, he decided to check what was the least expensive. Having chosen the Earth as a whole as his target, he decided to place it in subspace. But nothing happened, and the system reported that the target was outside its coverage area. By this time, Joshua had already freed himself and was now heading towards the guy. He had already managed to look at the route and decided to agree on the road he had chosen with Mikhail. This question didn't bother our hero much. He was more concerned with why Joshua was here now and not playing with his daughter. He smiled warmly and looked away. Little Molly slept soundly, surrounded by toys. When Joshua thanked the hero again for everything, he replied that they help each other, so everything is fair. But the man's suddenly serious tone made Mikhail tense up, and when they found themselves in the car, his bad feeling intensified sharply. Smiling, Joshua said he could only help in one way, by driving faster than anyone else. The hero's request to drive more slowly was ignored. Therefore, Mikhail had no choice but to come to terms with this horrific fact. So they set off on their journey. During the journey they encountered almost no monsters, and the road itself was much cleaner and more pleasant. But our hero could not enjoy all this properly, and only wished for the journey to end as quickly as possible. Suddenly something caught Joshua's attention. Their further path was blocked by military barricades and iron spikes. Joshua assumed that there were still military personnel left nearby. But Mikhail was full of confidence that this barricade was not their doing. The source of his confidence was the car approaching from behind. Although the equipment was military, those sitting inside did not look like military personnel at all. When the hero suggested that the aliens had been hiding and watching them all this time, Joshua became nervous. Having created a small portal in front of the man, Mikhail asked him to hide there. While the three strangers were examining the truck, he moved to the driver's seat and silently watched them. When Milton stepped forward, the hero asked what they wanted. He dryly demanded that he get out and open the cargo compartment for inspection. The hero decided not to argue with them and fulfilled their demand. The abundance of the truck that opened up to them made the fake soldiers whistle in admiration. When Milton mistakenly assumed that Michael was a courier, he decided not to correct him. The man immediately decided to appropriate all the supplies for himself, which confirmed the hero's guess regarding their goals. When asked where he got all these goods from, he honestly answered that they were all from the logistics center. He already had a plan in his head, so he suggested bringing these people more supplies. When Milton asked about the amount of food left in the center, the hero assured them that they currently only had 1% of the total supply in front of them. They had no more time for further conversation, as Thomas, standing behind them, reminded them. Having entrusted the truck to Thomas, Milton decided to take care of our hero personally. Before Mikhail could even understand what was happening, he felt a strong blow to his stomach. He was unable to stay on his feet due to the pain. Paul immediately approached him from behind with a bag in his hands. Mikhail was taken to a strange place, and only then was the bag suddenly pulled off. When he opened his eyes, he found himself tied to a chair, with the bloody corpse of a soldier lying to the side. The hero became significantly tense. He did not know where he was or what to expect. The man sitting in front of him sternly asked if the information he had received about the logistics center was true. When he replied that he had collected all those goods at the PAX logistics center, Mikhail was not lying at all. Then he asked where he was and what was happening. Leaning back, Samuel wearily replied that it was a military unit connected with the command's connections. Although the name that was pronounced was incorrect, the hero easily understood what was being discussed. A deafening roar from outside interrupted their conversation. The man had already gotten used to all this, so he did not seem surprised or frightened. When the curtains rose, Michael saw several wyverns approaching. In a matter of moments, the flock of wyverns eclipsed the entire sky. Michael was amazed by their terrifying size. Samuel lazily explained that these creatures were very dangerous because no attack could harm them. To confirm his words, he pointed to the dead soldier. He and the other soldiers used all their weapons to fight the monsters, but the result was only their own death. He then added that he did not kill the soldier. He was still quite alive, but was not in the best shape due to starvation. Having finished with this, he returned to their original topic, and said that there were plenty of weapons and equipment here, but there was no food of any kind. Therefore, Samuel put forward the condition for our hero's entry into their ranks, that supplies be delivered from the center. But the hero had other plans. Having learned everything necessary, he gave the order to the system to add the command building to the subspace. The next moment, the building simply evaporated into thin air before everyone's eyes. Samuel's face showed genuine shock. Neither he nor anyone else understood where the entire building had disappeared to. Suddenly, horror appeared on Milton's face. A huge flock of wyverns flew towards them. Everyone ran away in panic, trying to save themselves, but our hero managed to free himself from the ropes. When someone opened fire, Samuel angrily shouted that they should get rid of the small ones first, and then the large ones. But before he could finish speaking, a large specimen landed right next to him. The monster blocked his path with its enormous size, but the wyvern was in no hurry to attack. It seemed to be studying its victim. Taking advantage of the moment, our hero picked up the wounded soldier and carried him into his subspace. Mikhail knew he had acted recklessly by using the portal in front of everyone. But the situation was critical. Feeling someone's burning gaze on him, the guy looked back. The wyvern sitting nearby kept its attentive gaze on him. This raised a lot of questions and bewilderment in our hero. But the monster's attention was distracted by Milton. He struck the wyvern with furious blows in a desperate attempt to kill it. Michael had no intention of helping him, so he simply moved on. Soon, an excited Joshua ran up to them. He wanted to ask a lot of questions, but noticing another person, he stopped short. Mikhail explained that the man was a military man and that he was tortured by bandits. Together they managed to carry him to the bed in the restroom. Looking at his exhausted appearance, the hero decided that as soon as the stranger woke up, he would need to be fed. Coming to his senses, he warned Joshua that a new building would soon appear in subspace. But it seems that the hero was too late with the warning, because the man pointed somewhere towards the window. The multi-story building located there was simply mind-boggling. While our hero was in a state of shock, Joshua tried to understand what kind of building this was. Mikhail's words that this was a military unit caused great surprise in him too. The man responded to the request to look after their new friend without question. When Mikhail went to the military unit, he watched him go, wishing him good luck. Sometime later, the hero drove around the territory of the new location, studying it. The abundance of technology pleased him, but he feared that the place would be as difficult to use as a logistics center. The reason was that the territory of the base was too huge, and he did not know its structure. Another problem was that in case of danger, Joshua would have to constantly travel back and forth to get the necessary weapons. His thoughts were interrupted by a drone that suddenly appeared, explaining that all space was subordinated to the PAX center. The information that this sector also functions as a logistics warehouse came as a great shock to the guy. Wanting to make sure he understood everything correctly, the hero asked if the weapons from here could be copied and sent as in the PAX center. The drone replied that everything was true, but that the data from the new sector was currently being analyzed. Gradually realizing what was happening, Mikhail asked how long it would take to complete the analysis. The drone replied that it could first assign codes to the goods the hero needed, which would take no more than 10 minutes. Also, at his request, the drone restricted the rights to use the goods located here. After this, Mikhail opened a portal directly from the base territory. He glanced around the pack of monsters, assessing his capabilities. After 10 minutes he moved back to the center, fully armed. For the two of them, Joshua, the hero prepared 10,000 rounds of ammunition and a dozen spare guns. As the man reached for the rifle, Mikhail belatedly asked if he knew how to shoot. But the man decided that it would be better to show everything in action rather than explain it. The next moment he delivered a precise blow to the wyvern's head. He didn't stop for a moment, killing the monsters one after another. When the loaded bullets ran out, Joshua lowered his weapon wearily. Looking at the mountain of motionless bodies, he thought they had done a pretty good job. But Mikhail had a different opinion. He was alarmed by the absence of large specimens among the killed wyverns. All this time, one of these monsters was hiding behind the portal, quietly waiting for its victims. Joshua peered carefully at the corpses of the monsters, but could not find a single huge lizard anywhere. Then Mikhail suggested releasing a remote-controlled bait to lure the monster out. Following this plan, they took a dummy and tied it to controlled cars. Their tension was almost palpable when the bait was released. One sharp swing of a huge paw, and the mannequin's body was pierced through and through. After this, the monster itself appeared. With a furious growl, he tried hard to get inside. Mikhail reacted quickly and shouted to his frozen friend to shoot. Under fire, the wyvern didn't even think about dodging. It all stopped only a few minutes later, when everything outside was covered in thick smoke. Just as Joshua was beginning to think about winning, he noticed the monster's eyes flashing gold. He rushed forward with renewed vigor, but was stopped by a barrier. Mikhail was surprised, and did not understand how after all this wyvern was still standing on its feet. Suddenly he remembered Samuel's words that all his attacks on the monster were blocked by something. Now the hero began to guess that the lack of damage was not due to the strong skin, but to something else. Deciding to check something else, he threw a small grenade. When it exploded, a loud scream from a monster echoed throughout the area. Joshua knew that this wouldn't be enough, so he threw a few more grenades. The two of them pelted the wyvern with a continuous stream of grenades, intending to put an end to this. We stopped only when our hands began to feel very tired. Our hero barely had time to wonder if everything had worked out for them. when he was confronted with the yellow eyes of a wyvern. Mikhail found it hard to believe that an entire arsenal of explosives could only barely wound the monster. But what happened next left the guy even more shocked. The wyvern simply turned around and walked away. Neither the hero nor Joshua understood what exactly caused this, but they decided not to delay and get out of here as quickly as possible. So they got into a military jeep and moved on. The man still couldn't recover from his encounter with that huge wyvern. Mikhail's thoughts also replayed this fight in his head. He was afraid that they might encounter stronger monsters, but they had no weapons against them. As an emergency option, the hero could of course use flare guns. Only in this case the damage would be catastrophic and many innocent people would suffer. So he came to the conclusion that he needed an analog of a rocket, but without much damage to the terrain. Remembering the wyverns they had killed earlier, Mikhail decided to check the number of magic stones he had received. The number displayed in the message shocked him. The number of stones exceeded 300. That's why Mikhail didn't skimp when he spent stones to improve his delivery skill. In addition, he was finally able to open the subspace lab. Later, he asked Joshua to stop for a moment to check one thing. After thinking about his words, the man replied that they had almost reached Gangnam, and since there were practically no monsters on the way, he assured the guy that he would be able to go further. As a result, it was decided that Mikhail would leave the portal open in case of danger, and Joshua would go on. Once in the laboratory, the hero immediately noted that it was very different from other spaces. Immediately, a message appeared in front of him with information about two abilities available to him: combination and division. The first ability gave Mikhail the idea of creating a rifle with an unlimited magazine. He had questions about the separation, so he asked the drone if he could create a grenade without a safety ring. The drone explained that such a grenade would not explode until it was used for delivery. The hero did not miss this opportunity, and first of all asked to register the grenade without a pin and safety ring. He was pondering the capabilities of the rifle with the improved magazine when another message appeared in front of him. It contained the answer to his problem of making a weapon that was more powerful than a missile, and did not cause much damage to everything around it. Meanwhile, Joshua was faced with a problem in the form of a huge mountain of cars blocking the road. Mikhail appeared just at the moment when the man was thinking about how to get around this obstacle. Hearing about the problem that had arisen, the hero looked up at the mountain. Joshua suggested turning around and looking for another road, but Michael said not to do that. The news of the new weapon undoubtedly surprised his companion. Instead of explaining, the guy used the weapon he had created. All fired shells hit their target accurately, causing several powerful explosions. So in a matter of moments, the path was cleared. Joshua was in complete shock at the effect the stack of pancakes, which weighed over 300 kilograms, had. The noise from these explosions did not go unnoticed. The men standing guard immediately realized that such a strong wall could not collapse on its own, which meant that they were under attack. Soon, through the clouds of dust, they noticed an approaching car. When the car stopped in front of them, the thought that it might be military personnel horrified both of them. Rolling down the window, Mikhail asked if Nurse Emma Mitches worked there. He remembered how his older sister suddenly threw herself into her studies. Then his second older sister was very surprised by such drastic changes in her. This change worried the whole family, because previously Emma had difficulty sitting through even half a lesson without going crazy with boredom. But the girl herself explained everything quite simply. She had a dream. Like the main character in the novel she read, she wanted to become a doctor and take care of the sick. Little Michael and Kate thought their sister had simply gone crazy. However, Emma's aspiration was not just a childhood dream. She worked hard and tirelessly for several years. And then one day she finally managed to enter medical university. This was their first meeting since she had arrived. So, when Emma saw her brother, she couldn't hold back her tears. Mikhail also cried like a child, happy that his sister was alive. Now Joshua stood with a slight smile on his lips, watching the scene of the brother and sister being reunited. A little later, the hero introduced Emma to his friend, thanks to whom he was able to get here. The girl thanked the man for this and wanted to treat him to the rest of the chocolate, but Mikhail stopped her. Switching to a whisper, he told her about an injured patient who needed emergency care. Emma instantly became serious and demanded that this man be brought to her immediately. But when she heard that the wounded man was now in a special subspace, she was surprised that her brother had awakened. Having cut off unnecessary questions, Mikhail said that no outsiders should know about his ability if they did not want problems. So Emma led the two of them inside the hospital. The restroom was the only place where no one would disturb them. Joshua entered last and slammed the door behind him. The girl's face was frozen in shock and bewilderment when a logistics center materialized right in front of her. Without slowing down, the hero promised to explain everything to her later. But for now, they needed to take care of the wounded man. As soon as Emma was brought to the patient, she immediately began examining him. The man's appearance alone indicated that his condition was not the best. But the girl's words that he was not long for this world shocked our hero. It would have ended terribly if Emma hadn't had healing powers. Since her level was not high, the treatment took quite a long time. After giving him first aid, she reported that the main threat to his health remained severe malnutrition. Afterwards, Emma demanded that her brother immediately tell her everything. Soon they moved to the dining room, and while eating, Mikhail told her about everything that had happened to him. But his sister was too busy eating and missed most of what was said. The hero even began to feel like a superfluous person here when Emma began to praise Michelle's food every now and then. After announcing that she had prepared a restroom on the first floor, the woman left, leaving the brother and sister alone. Michael made sure that Emma hadn't listened to him at all when she asked how Michelle had ended up there. Deciding to leave out the details, he repeated that he was going to move their entire family into this space. He was so confident in his plan that he did not expect to hear Emma's sharp refusal. There were too many patients in the hospital for her to leave. Besides, there was another important reason why she couldn't leave this place. Emma said that the head doctor here uses some kind of poisonous ability that allows him to control others. She also admitted that all this time she had been stealing stones little by little to strengthen her abilities. Therefore, she strictly told Mikhail to go and look for his family, and she herself would stay here. But our hero had a different plan. Emma was indignant when she heard his refusal. The hero interrupted her angry tirade, saying that if the enemy's main weapon was food, then there would be no problems. He was determined to show her all his abilities. Emma thought it was just another teenage rebellion and decided to play along. But when she saw how large her brother's reserves were, she was speechless from surprise. Emma's brother, who arrived with a lot of food, was immediately reported to the head doctor. Edgar didn't perceive it as a threat, realizing that two people couldn't carry too much food in a regular car. Moreover, this fact even simplified the man's task. His face changed instantly when his subordinate said that Mikhail had more food than they had in stock. Edgar couldn't understand how this was even possible. Suddenly it occurred to him that it might be some kind of ability to produce something, or to reduce objects. He was determined to attract such a person to his side, and did not skimp on the humanity of his methods. Late at night, Mikhail secretly left food for patients. As he walked through each room, he also hoped to find one person. Earlier, the hero suggested replacing all the food given to people with his own, in order to weaken the effect of the ability. Emma interrupted him, warning him about one person whose ability posed a serious threat to Mikhail. Hearing heavy steps, the hero immediately turned around. The man approaching him was simply of incredible size. It was he who had previously built that wall of cars. Adam already knew who exactly was in front of him, so he said dryly that they needed to talk. The hero did not refuse this invitation, since he himself had business with this thug. When they went outside, Adam said that Mikhail had only two options. In one of them, the hero was offered to take medicine here and now. The other option would have meant his certain death. But Michael acted differently and chose the third option, to drive Adam into a trap. The man had absolutely no idea what our hero meant. Therefore, he took his words as a refusal and rushed at the guy. He had almost reached his target when an invisible barrier suddenly appeared in front of him. The next moment, a bowling ball flew into his chest at full speed, but this only weakened him slightly. So the next ball hit the ankle. Groaning in pain, Adam fell to his knees. Right there in front of him, a bundle of 100 discs fell to the ground. Bundles of discs appeared one after another around him, forming a high barricade. Despite the pain, Adam rose to his feet and grabbed the lower ligament with his hands. He strained every muscle in his body to do the impossible, and destroy the column that had grown up in front of him. Surprise appeared on his face as the bundles themselves began to be drawn into the open portal. While Adam was distracted, Michael built a whole fortress of discs around him. Having gotten rid of one obstacle in his path, the hero returned back to the hospital, where Emma was waiting for him. She heard a loud crash and was worried about it. The girl was shocked by her brother's words that he had just met Adam and neutralized him. Wanting to see for herself, she ran to the window and noticed a huge tower of discs. Completely perplexed, Emma demanded an explanation. But the hero switched to another topic. Joshua soon approached them, but his condition could not be called good. Hearing his complaint about an unbearable headache, Emma realized that he had been poisoned. When Michael asked what happened, Joshua said he simply shared some food and received a few words of gratitude. Suddenly, Emma noticed a small cut on his finger. After examining the wound more closely, she suggested that the person who did it might have accidentally bumped into him. Michael opened a portal to transport his friend to a safe, deserted place. The hero didn't like this whole situation, and he understood that he needed to get to the head doctor as quickly as possible and sort everything out. When the man entered, everyone saw a message that any energetic connection with this world was blocked here. Immediately after this, Joshua, who understood nothing, reported that the headache had disappeared. There was silence in the room for a few moments, as each of them realized what had happened. Suddenly, the floor beneath Adam flared with a blue glow, confusing the man. And then he was suddenly transported into our hero's subspace. Joshua and Emma, standing nearby, smiled happily as the man regained his senses. Later, they allowed him to meet his mother in one of the rooms, because of whom Adam became Edgar's puppet. As a token of gratitude, he decided to help deal with the head physician. He remembered everything he had done under its influence, and now he was overcome with strong guilt. When he walked towards Edgar alone, no one stopped him. Shortly before Adam arrived, Edgar had already received a message about the severance of their mental connection, so he was not surprised. Even after losing control over it, the man believed that all the cards were still on his side. Interrupting his monologue, Adam suddenly approached him and hit him on the floor. Meanwhile, our heroes discussed how they could free people from the influence on their minds. Mikhail suggested simply forcing everyone to enter his subspace. Emma and Joshua saw no other option, so they were forced to agree with him. But as soon as they made this decision, people themselves began to come to their senses. None of the three of them understood the reasons for what was happening. Adam, who appeared covered in blood, became the answer to their question. He personally dealt with the head doctor. Bowing low, he once again thanked our heroes for helping his mother and everyone else in the hospital. Mikhail didn't ask any unnecessary questions, because he already understood how Adam had figured everything out. Instead, he asked how he was feeling and apologized for the bowling ball he had dropped earlier. Adam did not hold a grudge for this, and admitted that he was very surprised by his abilities. His question about whether they were going to stay in the hospital surprised our hero. Realizing the selfishness of his request, the man expressed his desire that they all remain in the hospital. Michael understood his concerns, but he could not stay because he still had not met his family. Adam had no right to hold him back by force and only wished him luck. Mikhail decided to set off on his journey early in the morning, saying goodbye to everyone. Without taking his eyes off the road, Joshua asked what wall Adam had spoken of earlier. Mikhail was sure that this was somehow connected with the ability, and they would be able to communicate with its owner in order to overcome this obstacle. Yesterday, Adam said that when he was leaving the city of Y, he saw a huge wall rise up right from the ground. After listening to him, the hero came to the conclusion that movement on the ground would be completely impossible. While he was thinking about a way to destroy her, Adam warned him that the types of monsters that inhabited Y City were very different. The boy's face showed confusion when he heard about skeleton monsters. Adam explained that these undead are constantly roaming around the area and are almost impossible to kill. All this information about undying monsters and a huge wall made him feel uneasy. Despite such a dangerous situation, he was not worried about his second sister who was in Y City. On the contrary, Mikhail was confident that Kate would be able to defeat the monster without any abilities. Suddenly, a message appeared in front of him about an incoming call from Emma from the subspace. Opening the portal, he asked what she wanted. She seriously reported that the soldier he had saved had finally woken up. Having stopped the car, the hero and Joshua immediately moved towards it. Ivan thanked him for saving him and said that he was a lieutenant colonel heading the information department of the Ministry of Defense. Afterwards, the man looked around and asked where they were. Mikhail explained that this was a break room for the employees of the PAX logistics center in the subspace he created. It was too difficult for Ivan to understand what he was talking about now. Emma tried to explain everything to him in simpler language. Upon learning that they were physically in Gangnam, Ivan asked to be dropped off here. The bewildered hero, together with Joshua, hastened to assure the man that they had no intention of harming him. Ivan understood this without their words, and said that his request had a completely different reason. Although he couldn't name her, he said he needed to contact the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Mikhail sighed heavily and agreed to fulfill his request. But before that, he asked the robot to bring milk and a sandwich. Handing Ivan the food, the hero sternly said that he could drop him off here, but he would not allow him to leave hungry. In addition to food, he set the condition that before leaving, Ivan must tell him about everything that happened. The man tried to resist. It was too difficult for him to talk about it. But our hero stood his ground and even added more delicious food. Ivan couldn't resist, and told that one day, creatures from another world simply began to appear all over the world. The government stood up to these monsters, gathering the forces of the Awakened together. Although the strength of the squads created from such soldiers was amazing, no one could stand against one monster. No weapons, grenades, or shells worked against the Wyvern. There were no reinforcements from other cities because they were also under siege by another powerful being. Therefore, a group was allocated to reach the Defense Communications Command. Many died along the way, and they had to recruit awakened ones to continue moving forward. After several days, they finally managed to achieve their goal. But they were unable to find anyone except documents about the plan for a coup d'etat. For this reason, Ivan tried to report this to his superiors as soon as possible. Mikhail understood the complexity of the situation, but he could not let him off before they crossed the bridge over the River X. Immediately after this, he and Joshua decided to return back to... All this time, Ivan wondered what kind of ability our hero possessed. since he managed to escape from that huge wyvern alive. When the portal opened and the ogre appeared there, he was overcome with horror. But our heroes paid absolutely no attention to the monster. Even when the monster was attacked by a stack of discs, they calmly continued their conversation about their preferred speed of movement. Ivan even dropped the food from his hands out of shock and bewilderment. But the next moment, something even more shocking for him happened. A war machine emerged from another portal. Looking back, Mikhail said that they would soon be there and he would leave the portal open so that they could see what was happening. After that, he climbed inside the car. Ivan was completely confused and could not understand whether he was hallucinating or whether this was the guy's ability. They encountered a couple more ogres on the way, but they were easily eliminated. Ivan watched what was happening without taking his eyes off the window. If at first he thought that he had imagined it all, now he realized that what was happening was real. During this time, he saw how incredible the boy's strength was. Suddenly, they were faced with a new problem. The bridge they were about to cross had collapsed. With an awkward smile, the hero apologized to the soldier and said that they would need a little more time. Ivan replied that he was already grateful to them simply for their help and decided to return back to subspace. He had already noted Mikhail's ability earlier, but Joshua's driving abilities amazed him no less. The man did such things at full speed that just the sight of him made you feel sick. Ivan could only be glad that this time he managed to escape into subspace before that. Soon they came to another bridge, which was luckier to survive to a greater extent. Although it was possible to drive here, something made our hero wary. The tops of city buildings and something resembling a wall could be seen off to the side of the bridge. Our heroes understood that since the wall was visible even from here, they would not be able to drive through it by car. Thinking about what they should do, Joshua suggested that they first get to her through City C and at the same time take Ivan there. When they dropped the soldier off at the headquarters of the command, he thanked them for their assistance. After saying goodbye to him, Mikhail wished him good luck. He decided not to stay any longer and head to the city of Y. Suddenly, Ivan voiced an offer to go with him and join the ranks of the military with the support of the government. For Mikhail, family came first, so he could not accept this offer. Ivan did not insist on his own. After thinking about his words for a bit, the hero asked if the government had a couple of helicopters. Gilbert, the acting head of the military government, had been standing at the map for a long time. The situation became more and more complicated with each passing day, and the man could no longer say with doubt that the government still existed. He was distracted from his heavy thoughts by a subordinate who entered. He reported the arrival of the surviving commander of the Information Corps. The information he heard greatly surprised Gilbert. Ivan was immediately invited into the office. Gilbert asked him a lot of questions. Having answered them, the man handed him the letter he had found about the coup. The head of government's face distorted with horror as soon as he read this information. Later, Ivan told him about his friends who saved his life. Together with Ivan, Gilbert went outside and thanked them for the help they had provided to their country. Earlier, he had been told of Mikhail's request to exchange the helicopter for supplies, and the man was ready to meet him halfway. The only condition he set was that Mikhail and Joshua become military personnel. The hero refused this, repeating that saving his family was his priority. In turn, Gilbert responded that in that case he would not be able to provide him with a plane. Having received a refusal, Mikhail expressed hope that soon everyone would be able to return to normal life and said goodbye to him. Neither Gilbert nor Ivan expected the guy to accept the refusal so easily. The hero was confident that he would come up with a way to get rid of the wall, so the problem of the lack of a helicopter was not so important to him. Gilbert, on the other hand, needed the guy's abilities, so despite his pride, he had to ask him for help. Only if his request was fulfilled was he ready to provide Mikhail with a helicopter. An hour later, several military trucks were racing through the city. All this time, the hero was thinking about Gilbert's request. Earlier, the man asked him to destroy the skeleton monsters and help the isolated awakened ones escape. He also told Mikhail all the weaknesses of these monsters that he knew, but the hero could easily destroy the skeletons even without this information. Thus, they quickly reached the station building with the awakened ones. The military helped everyone safely leave the building and get into trucks. Afterwards, they signaled to our heroes that they were ready to go back. On the way back, Mikhail looked out the window with boredom. At some point, another monster appeared on their path. The hero immediately opened the portal, deciding to get rid of it with the help of the discs. But this skeleton was different from all the others. With just one swing, it managed to repel the attack flying at it. What happened left Michael and Joshua in great shock. For the first time after this attack, the monster managed to stay alive. Suddenly, the skeleton began to speak, but the language was completely incomprehensible to the heroes. Afterwards, he pulled out the magic stone and crushed it with force. Thanks to this, his language became understandable to everyone. The skeleton asked questions about why strangers had invaded this territory. Instead of answering, the hero sent another charge of discs at him, which the monster easily cut in two. At the same time, another attack flew at him, knocking him off his feet. To slow down, the skeleton had to use its sword. At first he was not in the mood for a fight, but now he had no other choice. This time several shells were flying at him at once. Thanks to his sword, he got rid of the threat and broke through. The incredible strength of the enemy made our heroes, especially Joshua, nervous. Mikhail went through all the weapons he had. The next moment, a charge of weights flew out of the portal. The monster decided that he didn't have to fight back every time and simply dodged. But he didn't expect the discs to follow him, so he was knocked down again. Raising an angry gaze to the enemy, the skeleton said that such a small thing could not kill him. Here he was hit on the head by a bowling ball. The monster had absolutely no idea what was happening. He didn't even have time to notice another ball approaching. Mikhail released ball after ball, giving the system the order in which to hit and where automatically. Joshua could only watch in shock. In these couple of minutes, the hero managed to understand that this monster was even more dangerous than that giant wyvern. So he decided to take advantage of the moment and send people back while there was still a chance. Suddenly, Joshua noticed that there was a lot more debris flying off the monster after the blows. This inspired Mikhail. He immediately sent about a dozen stacks of discs at the skeleton. This attack was able to break the monster's defense and cause its body to fly apart. For killing him, 3 large magic stones dropped at once. When they were drawn into the portal, the surprised hero received a message that he had received a strengthening stone and 2 large magic ones. The other soldiers could hardly believe that this monster had been destroyed so quickly. Joyful cries of the awakened began to be heard from the trucks, praising our hero. Upon returning to government headquarters, Gilbert again offered Mikhail to join the military, but he refused. Without losing hope, the man asked him to think about it again after reuniting with his family. Soon they were led to the roof to the promised helicopter. But the guy still couldn't stop thinking about that skeleton. He was at a loss to understand why a bowling ball could crack the skeleton's armor, but a heavy projectile made of discs could not. His thoughts were interrupted by Gilbert, who asked if Mikhail was heading to the city of Y. After receiving his confirmation, the man reported that the unit members on the other side of the wall were safe. Our hero wasn't even worried about his second sister, who was also there. She herself was as strong as a monster. Soon they reached the roof where the helicopter was located. But he was not at all in the state in which the hero expected to see him. Mikhail even doubted whether this helicopter would be able to take off without falling apart. Noticing his confusion, Gilbert pointed to the side, saying that their helicopter was over there. This helicopter was much better than that wreck and even aroused admiration. At the sight of it, Joshua couldn't help but let out a cry of delight, already anticipating how he would pilot it. The head of government entrusted them with this helicopter to show that he sees them as reliable allies. Noticing Joshua's enthusiasm, he asked him if he had flown a helicopter before. The man replied that this would be the first time for him. Right there in front of him appeared a message that he would be able to control a helicopter with the help of 50 magic stones. It also became clear that instead of leveling up, Joshua was given a driving license. Hearing about the need for magic stones, Gilbert asked them to come with him. He walked quickly towards the helicopter and pulled a suitcase full of stones out of the cabin. These 200 stones were a gift from the military government to Mikhail for the assistance he had provided. The hero even felt awkward because of such generosity. Joshua's cry of confusion made him turn around. With a frightening smile, he said that now he knew how to operate this machine. Therefore, he wanted to leave immediately. Once inside, Mikhail was already preparing himself for the worst. The quiet chuckles and the speed with which Joshua adjusted the controls couldn't help but instill fear. To distract himself from this, the hero decided to look at the number of his magic stones. The system informed him that he could transform the 2 large magic stones he had and get 200 ordinary ones from them. Mikhail decided to take advantage of this opportunity and improve his level. Besides that, he still had a strengthening stone that also needed to be used somewhere. Thanks to the system, Mikhail learned that this stone gives objects the same fire elemental as the skeleton had. After some thought, he decided to apply the stone to a bowling ball. Then he asked the drone to register the received item in the system. During this time, Joshua completed the necessary equipment setup and was ready to set out. Standing outside, Gilbert wished them a safe journey and a safe return. At that very moment, a message appeared in front of Mikhail about the completion of the level-up process. Gilbert kept his eyes on the helicopter, thinking that he had to convince the hero to become a soldier. The look of shock on the boy's face made him wonder if he had made a mistake somewhere. What struck Mikhail so much was that he could only register objects from outside the corresponding category. This was precisely the downside of subspace. Only objects like a logistics center or a military unit were stored there. Suddenly it dawned on him that this helicopter was military and tried to register it in the system. Gilbert was about to leave the roof but stopped when he heard an approaching sound. For some reason, the helicopter turned around and was now flying back. The man did not understand why at all, and even assumed that there were some problems with the helicopter. Suddenly, a portal opened in the air, and 2 identical helicopters fell from there onto the roof. After this, our heroes flew on, and Gilbert remained standing in complete shock. The undead king sat on his throne, pondering the report he had heard earlier about the dead skeleton knight. His second knight considered Michael too dangerous, and was eager to fight to eliminate this threat. But the king saw no point in this, believing that they would be better off concentrating on the harvest. Sensing the penetration of a man into their castle, Lancelot immediately reported this to his master. But he didn't attach much importance to this, considering this madman to be just another meal for his pet. Once outside the walls of the city of Y, our heroes immediately encountered a monster, but it was quickly destroyed. Joshua warned that landing would be difficult now. The hero decided that there was a problem with the landing site, but the man replied that this was not the case. Down below them, a battle between a skeleton knight and another monster was unfolding. Noticing a familiar silhouette, Mikhail tensed. The girl threw her opponent aside with one powerful blow. The monster's collision with the wall of the building sent a thick wall of dust into the air. Joshua feared that now they would have to deal with both of these monsters at once. When Mikhail admitted that one of these monsters was his sister, he could not hide his surprise. Meanwhile, Kate couldn't understand why, after her killing blow, that monster was still alive. Her love for fighting began with a random martial arts video she saw as a child. Luckily for her, she had a younger brother to practice on. But victories over a weak opponent did not make her happy at all. So she went to the playground with the older kids, but there wasn't a single worthy opponent there either. Having spotted her talent for fighting, he sent Kate to a boxing club. It was there that she suffered her first defeat in her life. But this only piqued her interest further. Possessing incredible talent, she trained tirelessly. So by her first year of high school, no one at her rank could compete with her. Over the years, Kate's passion for fighting, bordering on obsession, has escalated to a serious level. As a result, she suffered an injury that tore both cruciate ligaments. But the injuries took too long to heal, and she resumed training prematurely, suffering new injuries. After finishing his story, Michael asked Joshua to descend slowly so that he could have time to throw the bowling ball. Meanwhile, the practically unharmed monster slowly approached Kate. The only question that interested him was why his attacks weren't reaching her. She replied that he was too slow. But the monster was sure that the problem lay elsewhere, and that the girl possessed some kind of technology. Kate continued to answer in a convoluted manner, without giving any specifics. When the skeleton said that she could become one of the best knights, Kate was perplexed. Suddenly he announced that he would allow her to go and even leave this castle to avoid death. It was at that moment that a ball of flame fell on him, destroying his body. Kate was even more confused when she saw the bowling ball. A few moments later, a military helicopter appeared in the air above her. When it went down and a man started to come out of it, the girl tensed up. Afterwards, she saw her younger brother smiling contentedly. She had a hard time believing that it was really him. After some time, they moved into a subspace, where they were met by Emma. Watching her sister, Emma decided to learn more about her sister's powers. Without looking up from her meal, she said that her ability creates a special barrier that also improves physical skills. The hero was glad that they were finally able to meet, and suggested going to the next point. But Kate interrupted him, asking what kind of cheating skill he had. The guy did not explain, saying that it would take a lot of time. Afterwards, having said that they could contact the robot with any questions, he stood up from the table. He intended to get out of the city before the sky completely closed. But the chances of this were rapidly melting away before our eyes, and everything around began to fill with darkness. Without wasting a moment, Michael and Joshua returned to the helicopter. Flying up to one of the walls, they began to continuously attack it with bowling balls. But this attack did not cause serious damage, only leaving slight dents. Michael understood that the sky would not open again, and assumed that he would have to place this entire place in subspace. In addition, he couldn't level up his ability because he had already used up all the crystals. Suddenly his attention was drawn to Kate's words that this was all actually true. The hero didn't understand what was going on, so she explained that the monster he killed said that she would die if she stayed there. When Kate casually mentioned a certain king of knights, Mikhail understood where exactly to look for a solution to the problem. But they didn't have much time to search, and the city was huge. But here Joshua came to his aid. The hero panicked when he was told that it would take him no more than 5 minutes to solve this problem. Ignoring all his cries, the man began to quickly descend. Meanwhile, Lancelot reported to the king about the death of another of the 12 knights. The king clearly did not like the fact that someone dared to interfere with his coming harvest. He was about to deal with the intruder himself, when the skull announced that those people were already on their way to them. Here he noticed a helicopter flying past through the window. The short trip sucked all the life force out of Mikhail, taking him for one of the undead. The king was perplexed, because earlier they said that the enemy was a magician. But a plan to eliminate this obstacle quickly matured in his head. he decided to feed the enemy to the monsters hanging at the entrance to the castle. When our hero emerged from under the space towards the castle gates, the contents of his stomach burst out. After what he had experienced today, he vowed never to fly a helicopter again. Suddenly, Kate, standing behind him, tensed up. A monster was flying straight towards Mikhail with a terrible screech. Kate's reaction was lightning fast. With a powerful punch, she attacked the monster on the head. He flew back and didn't move anymore. The weakened and exhausted hero quietly thanked her, but she informed him that it was not over yet. Mikhail again didn't understand what she was talking about. Soon his silent question disappeared by itself when the scarlet eyes of a whole flock of monsters flashed before them. The hero assessed the danger of the situation and told Joshua to go into subspace. Kate's spirits were lifted, delighted by the large number of opponents. Ignoring Mikhail, she fearlessly rushed forward. With one jump, she managed to finish off the monster lying on the floor. The remaining monsters rushed towards her at the same time, but Kate confidently fought them off. At some point, one of them snuck up behind her and sank its fangs into her neck. The girl pulled it off herself quite easily and threw it on the floor. There was a contented smile on her face, indicating that she was thoroughly enjoying the process. Mikhail also decided not to stand aside and looked for a way to help his sister. Having dealt with another enemy, Kate called the next one to her. But none of the monsters dared to even move. They simply froze, looking somewhere to the side. To understand what was going on, the girl looked back. There she saw a mountain of dead monsters, electrocuted, and next to them was an electric repeller. Meanwhile, our hero was in his subspace and enjoying the massage chair, watching the whole process. Kate's face reflected bewilderment mixed with displeasure at being disturbed. Another monster, hiding in an inconspicuous place, was watching all this from the side. Returning to his master, he reported everything he had seen. The king understood that his strength would still be enough against the magician, but he would not be able to stand up to two strong enemies. Therefore, he saw no other choice but to send Lancelot. He also understood that it would be foolish to put up an equal opponent against a strong enemy. Tristan understood the necessity of his sacrifice, and did not resist. So the next moment a red stone flew out of his body, and he himself was dispersed. The king passed all 3 power-up stones to his last fighter, empowering him. Later, our hero improved the electric repeller by combining it with a bat. Kate was incredibly happy to receive such a convenient and effective weapon. When they exited back to the real world, Mikhail warned that when an item is combined with another, its power is reduced. But the girl didn't care much about this. She was already confident in her abilities. Noticing that she was constantly scratching her neck, he became concerned. Kate's words about how she had been bitten on the neck earlier, and that everything was fine before leaving the subspace, horrified the guy. When he suggested that she was turning into a vampire, Kate threatened him with a bat. And when the hero opened the door in front of him, she seriously said that he could kill her if she really had to become a vampire. At that moment, their attention was drawn to the voice of the king sitting on the throne. He was interested in why Mikhail decided to interfere in other people's affairs and create a lot of problems. The hero only raised an eyebrow in bewilderment, guessing that this was the king, and Kate was glad that they wouldn't have to look for him themselves. The monster was talking about something else, but they didn't understand him at all. At his master's first command, Lancelot pulled the sword from behind his back. Kate was happy to take on the fight and try out her new weapon. Rolling up her sleeves, she told her brother not to worry about her this time. But the next moment, she barely managed to react to the enemy's sudden attack. The knight's strength was superior to hers, so he easily cut the bat in half. Kate had to jump to the side to avoid taking damage. Mikhail did not understand at all why the bat could not withstand this blow, unlike his sister. It was obvious to her that the problem was not with the weapon, but with the fact that the enemy was too strong. The hero was surprised by her words, because Kate could rarely call anyone strong. When he asked her to give him some magic stones, the girl responded with a categorical refusal. He had no other choice, so Mikhail attacked with what he could. Bowling balls. Usually they killed monsters in a flash, but not this time. The knight cut through each of the balls flying at him. Mikhail was truly perplexed, and did not understand how this was possible. At some point, Kate re-entered the fight, punching the monster in the helmet. She deftly dodged his blows, looking for an opportunity to deliver her own. Carried away by the battle, the monster completely failed to notice the ball flying towards him, and was hit. After doing a somersault in the air, he stood up on his feet without difficulty. After this attack, Lancelot, as before, did not have a single scratch. This undoubtedly struck the hero, because he expected a completely different effect. A sense of unease entered his heart as he realized that this monster was even more dangerous than any he had encountered before. Mikhail immediately opened portals that pulled him and Kate back into subspace. She was completely indignant at this action of her brother, but the hero explained that their enemy was too strong, and it was dangerous to stay there any longer. Suddenly, Lancelot disappeared and appeared right in front of them, attacking the portal with all his might. For a moment, it even seemed to Mikhail that his blade was capable of cutting through the protective matter of the portal. Even Kate had enough of this to recognize the knight as a dangerous enemy. When a hail of bowling balls flew at the monster again, it easily got rid of them. Watching him, Mikhail did not understand at all how the enemy managed to dodge even those balls that flew out in front of him. The king also watched what was happening from his throne. He believed that the enemy was too cowardly, since he hid behind the dimensional gates and used only objects and not his magic. Feeling disappointed, he regretted calling Lancelot here, sacrificing so much. But suddenly he noticed that the chopped balls had already formed a whole mountain near his tone. Here he found inconsistencies, and again asked himself why the enemy did not use magic, which would be more effective. Meanwhile, Michael was trying to figure out what to do with that knight. Since he had previously created weapons without thinking, he had used up all the stones and the strongest thing he had left was bowling balls. The only problem was that they were of no use. Mikhail was also afraid to leave the portal, because the enemy could kill him right at the entrance. The king's sudden order to stop pulled the boy out of these thoughts. Michael also told the system not to take any action. Heading straight towards them, the king voiced his guess that the hero was not a magician, but an ordinary person. He also guessed about Mikhail's ability. The monster's own delusion made him laugh ironically. He then ordered Lancelot to put away his sword, explaining that they were now all on the same side and would be partners. Neither our hero nor his sister understood at all why the king suddenly called them that. He said that in this castle, Camelot, they would be able to create power stones in exchange for living beings. Mikhail's memory immediately recalled the red magic stones he had received for killing another knight. Cole also said that with the help of these stones, one can summon the 12 knights belonging to this castle. When the information was announced that Lancelot was also among these knights, the hero turned an appraising glance at him. Finally getting to the point, the monster suggested that he combine their powers and create an unlimited number of power stones. Such a generous offer of cooperation truly touched the guy. The king was confused when Michael ordered the system to move Camelot into subspace. And the next moment the castle completely disappeared. The monster, completely confused, began to look around. Our heroes looked with interest at the small stone on the guy's palm, which was Camelot. Seeing this, the king became truly furious and demanded that his property be returned. Without holding back, he sent a deadly attack at Michael. When it hit its target, the blow caused a terrifying explosion. But our hero remained safe and sound, and Lancelot stood up to protect him. The knight recognized him as his new master. Realizing that the situation had turned out to be not in his favor, the king became noticeably nervous. But he didn't have time to do anything. Lancelot cut off his head with a sharp movement. Thus the king was defeated. All that was left of him was a yellow magic stone, which was immediately picked up by Lancelot. After this, the system reported that the account of the defeated king was transferred to our hero through the knight. When he saw the reflected sum of 3,000 crystals, the guy couldn't contain his delight. Standing next to him, Kate immediately demanded 1,000 stones from him as payment for the life he had saved earlier. Mikhail was very grateful to her, but was not ready to part with the announced amount of stones. After a long argument about who helped whom, they agreed on 500 stones. Afterwards, Kate turned her gaze to the knight and asked her brother what he intended to do with him. The answer to this question was found quite quickly. Molly was simply crazy about her new playmate. Joshua and Michelle felt a little confused as they watched their daughter fall completely in love with Lancelot. During the game, he protected the girl from danger in every possible way, and did not allow her to get hurt. Meanwhile, Mikhail and Emma, standing to the side, were discussing their next destination. The girl was concerned that he had not rested at all in the last few days, and advised him to set off on the road tomorrow. The hero was surprised by her remark, because he himself did not pay attention to his own fatigue. As he pondered her words, he turned his gaze to his merry friends. Afterwards, he decided that it was dangerous to move at night, so they could wait a little. Having played enough, Molly herself did not notice how she fell asleep. Saying goodbye to Joshua's family, the hero reminded them that they were leaving early in the morning. And when they left, Michael turned his attention to the knight, concerned about his place to sleep. To resolve this issue, he called upon the castle of Camelot. But he didn't know how many stones were needed to make a castle of the right size. He eventually decided to put in 300 stones, and the castle instantly increased in size. It was hard for Kate to even imagine how many stones the king had put into making Camelot so incredibly huge. Standing, Lancelot guessed that it must have taken more than tens of thousands of stones. When Michael asked why she hadn't gone to bed, Kate replied that she had a couple of questions for Lancelot, and then she turned to the knight with a request to teach her the art of his swordsmanship. Our hero was very surprised, because he never expected such words from his sister. Lancelot quickly agreed, but in return he put forward a condition. He asked to teach him her punch, used in combat. Kate chuckled contentedly, accepting his condition. So they started a training sparring. and then the hero decided to go to bed. The next morning, our heroes had barely managed to exit the portal when they saw several military men outside. Both men found this phenomenon very strange. Suddenly, a military helicopter flew near them. His appearance surprised the heroes even more. When the helicopter landed nearby, a joyful Gilbert jumped out. The man immediately hurriedly approached them, saying that he had been looking for them for a long time after the wall was destroyed. Mikhail had already thought that he had come all this way in order to once again insist on his offer to join the military. But instead, Gilbert warned them that they could not move any further in the helicopter because they could be shot down by the enemy. It turned out that after their departure, the 1st Military Corps captured the capital's defense forces. To determine the exact strength of the enemy, the government sent out reconnaissance drones, but all were shot down. So Gilbert insisted that our heroes change their route and make a small detour, avoiding dangerous areas. This news did not make Mikhail happy. He could have actually followed the advice and made a detour to get to his parents. But in the City D, which is a dangerous zone, his brother and sister-in-law were now located. Also, in the current situation, it became clear that our hero's family was threatened not only by monsters, but also by terrorists. Having made his decision, Michael opened a portal and summoned Lancelot. And then, pointing at the knight, he confidently said that together with him, they would be able to break through the enemies. Gilbert was scared and in complete shock at the sight of the skeleton knight. Mikhail suggested that they all join forces and develop a plan to destroy the rebels. Within a few days, they managed to develop a plan according to which Lancelot was to conduct reconnaissance of the enemy positions. They chose the University of O as their first reconnaissance point to test the knight's range of movement. Thus, Lancelot, in the form of a ghost, was able to discreetly observe the enemy and collect the necessary information. The first strange thing he noticed was goblins in military uniforms and people locked in cages. When he reported what he had seen to Mikhail, he was perplexed. But the information he received shocked not only him, but everyone else as well. The hero assumed that the goblins had voluntarily joined the rebels, but he did not understand why they would take people captive. Lancelot said that a certain priest had ordered that people be held back because they were causing what was called repulsion. Michael did not understand what was being discussed. Then the knight explained that this repulsion was a special right to protection. The lower the creature's hierarchy level, the stronger the repulsion. After his explanation, Kate still didn't understand why the enemies would sacrifice people to get this necessary step. Lancelot also added that often the use of such sacrifices involves deals with higher-level beings. Michael asked several clarifying questions about these transactions, but the knight did not have any more information. But even this was enough to make Kate eager to immediately go and give her enemies a beating. But Gilbert did not give in to emotions, and soberly assessing the situation, assumed that the enemy's plan was more dangerous than they thought. He explained that the enemy's line of defense was stronger than expected, and their small skirmish could turn into a full-scale war. Therefore, in order to do everything quickly, they had to. But without support, they couldn't cope. The hero understood that they did not have time to wait for support, because his brother's family was there. He was confident that Lancelot was strong enough to destroy the enemies single-handedly. But the problem was the large territory. Guessing the direction of his thoughts, Lancelot suggested calling another knight. But Michael explained that they did not have the Power Stone to do this. He greatly regretted that the magic and strengthening stones could not be copied using the system. Then Lancelot reminded him that after the king's victory they had received the Power Stone. The hero did not immediately remember this, so he was very surprised. All 4 pairs of heavy gazes were directed at him. Now that the problem with the stone was resolved, Lancelot advised calling Bruce. Hearing that this knight was incredibly good at long-range attacks, the hero was eager to meet him immediately. Nicole sat in a locked cage with people who had long since died. Suddenly one of the goblins called out to her and asked if she wanted to escape from here. Such an unexpected proposal surprised the girl. But in exchange for his help, the goblin wanted to receive a very obvious reward from her. As soon as he voiced his condition, the head flew off his neck. And then the knight appeared and destroyed the castle on the cell. A shocked Nicole walked out hesitantly, watching her savior with a surprised look. Meanwhile, the attack on the goblin weapons located here continued. The monsters' faces reflected true horror as they realized they were in danger. But they could no longer do anything, because the powerful attack destroyed them in an instant. Every throw from Bruce was extremely precise, and it was impossible to dodge it. Earlier, Lancelot warned Michael that Bruce was a genius at what he did, despite being one-armed. The hero was perplexed by this news. Lancelot had to tell the story of his brother's life, and how an envious commander cut off the hand of his best fighter. From then on, Bruce replaced his bow with a leather belt and began throwing stones and spears with it. Mikhail doubted that Bruce would actually cope with his task and destroy the enemy installations. But Lancelot assured him of his brother's skill, and added that not everyone could get into the circle of 12 knights of Camelot. The goblin in the control building panicked when he noticed a section of forest on fire. Suddenly, the partner standing nearby was knocked down. Luke had absolutely no idea what was happening, but he looked up in front of him and froze in place. Lancelot approached him with unhurried steps. Meanwhile, our heroes saw several balls explode in the air. The confused hero immediately recognized the signal he had told Bruce to give when all enemy installations were destroyed. No less surprised, Gilbert even came to the conclusion that if everyone had such skills, there would be no need for special forces. Meanwhile, Bruce was trying to figure out the map Lancelot had given him. Having given up on his futile attempts, the knight decided to simply go as he felt. Lancelot himself was still dealing with the goblin who held the position of commander. He didn't kill Luke because he needed to get information about who was in charge of all this and where he was. With a smirk on his lips, the goblin replied that the being that controlled everything was named Thanatos. To his surprise, Lancelot had never heard this name before and asked what their ultimate goal was. But instead of answering, the goblin threw his leg off. And then he jumped to his feet and started to run away. The only available exit from the building was the window through which he jumped. When he landed on the ground, he was immediately surrounded by worried subordinates. After giving the order to bring the motorcycle here, Luke tried to slowly stand up on his injured leg. Here, Lancelot also jumped down, saying that it was useless to run away from him. The other goblins immediately rushed forward to protect their general. They were absolutely confident in their strength against the knight due to their increased level after eating people. When Lancelot coldly asked if all goblins were humans eaters, he immediately confirmed the fact. After these words, Lancelot instantly found himself behind his opponent, getting rid of another goblin. And then he cut off his neck too. Horror was reflected on the faces of the fleeing general and the goblin accompanying him. From the noise coming from above, they realized that they would not be able to hide. Joshua, sitting at the wheel of the helicopter, happily announced that he was going to land right now. When the subordinate goblin asked the general what they should do, he pierced his neck with his palm, and then he began to viciously devour his flesh. As soon as Michael came out and approached Lancelot, he too witnessed this scene. Once the goblin was completely devoured, the knight confirmed that Luke had reached level 8. Michael noticed that with this, the monster completely lost its humanity. But Lancelot explained that this was due to a sudden increase in level. Afterwards, he assured that Bruce would completely deal with this guy, and there was no need for them to interfere. At that very moment, the said knight appeared on the roof, ready to attack. For the goblin who had lost his mind, this attack was his last. Soon Gilbert approached the hero and reported that, thanks to the work done, the rescue of the residents was going smoothly. When the man wondered where Brigadier General Mikhail had gone, he glanced at the remaining bloody mess. While Gilbert was perplexed, the hero asked Lancelot if he had managed to find out anything about their plans. He admitted that he could not find out anything other than the fact of the existence of some high-level being. Here Gilbert intervened in the conversation and suggested that they might be able to learn something by looking through the dead general's documents. Then he turned to the knight and asked where the building was. The general stopped. Lancelot pointed behind him to the broken window. Mikhail immediately asked the system if it could classify all the documents and maps in that building as military. After making an assessment, she displayed a message that 120 magic stones would be required for this. Having given the order to begin the process, the hero assured Gilbert that they would not have to waste a lot of time on paperwork. A little later, they discovered documents that did not fit the category. These were applications for registration of a spatial being. Lancelot explained that these were documents that helped to level up, and one of them was fake. He also pointed out the need to register one's own existence using stones and an account in the dimension. Since our hero had both, he suggested that he try registering now. This proposal left Mikhail truly perplexed. Anticipating questions, Lancelot explained that filling out the official form would not make him a goblin. It was difficult for the hero to make a decision, because the cost was considerable, 1,000 magic stones. But ultimately they decided to fill out the registration form. Once all the data was entered, the paper simply disappeared into thin air in front of him. When a confused Michael asked if that was all, Lancelot confirmed it. The remaining volume of documents was quite large, and our hero could not delay the search for his family any longer. Therefore, he entrusted the verification of documents to the head of the military government, and promised to return here later. For safety reasons, Michael decided to set out on his journey with only 2 skeleton knights. He also planned to travel by regular transport, but the entire subspace was filled with military equipment. So he went down the stairs, deciding that he would ride a regular bike, even though it would take longer. But when he went outside, he saw Bruce trying to master the motorcycle. Without hiding his shock, Mikhail asked the knight where he got the motorcycle. Bruce looked towards the dead goblins and replied that the horse belonged to one of them. The information that the motorcycle belonged to the military gave the hero a stunning idea. Sometime later, the goblins guarding another area heard the sound of a roaring engine approaching. One of them immediately aimed his gun at the target, not intending to let the stranger pass. But before he could fire, his head was crushed by a bowling ball. His confused partner didn't even notice the knight approaching him with his sword raised, and so the head of the second monster was torn off from his shoulders, and our hero calmly rode on. Having reached the desired house, Michael and the knight stopped. The guy quickly went up to the right floor and started banging on the door, shouting at his brother to open it. But no matter how hard he knocked and shouted, there was no answer. This sign made the hero think about the worst. He eventually forced his way into the empty apartment. Inside there was complete devastation, and there were even traces of shelling. Lancelot slipped inside as well, deciding to be the first to inspect the apartment for safety. Looking around, the hero hoped that his brother and wife had left the house to take refuge somewhere else. Suddenly he noticed a letter rolled up into a bundle on the table. In it, Victor wrote about his decision to go to the city of Y to see his remaining family. There he also warned that going into the city of Y would soon be a bad idea due to the increasing number of kidnappings. After reading, Mikhail was left with mixed feelings of joy and concern. Afterwards, the hero handed the letter to Bruce and asked him to show it to the others in subspace. He could not waste time here, so he immediately told Lancelot that they must move on. But suddenly a helicopter froze in the window opposite them. The goblin inside immediately opened fire on them. When the shelling stopped, the room was filled with a curtain of smoke. Mikhail emerged from there unharmed and casually said that it was much hotter than he thought. Then he gave the order to the system to save this helicopter in the military item category. At that very moment, the goblin sitting inside found himself floating in the air. Ignoring his terrified cries, the hero told Lancelot that they could not afford to waste any more time. The city was also full of military goblins. Michael furiously shouted at them to get out of there. Lancelot followed him on a motorcycle and got rid of the monsters. One-armed Bruce was also keeping up with him, making throws while riding his motorcycle. There were witnesses to all this, hiding in a nearby shop. Alfred, Michael's father, could hardly believe that his son had arrived here on a motorcycle in the company of skeletons. Alfred had many ups and downs in his life, but he was able to survive thanks to the people around him. So he raised his children, teaching them that love is important. And while they were growing up, the man had a dream: to build a large and spacious house for his whole family. But when he got down to business, he realized that this task was much more difficult than it seemed, and the dream remained just a dream. The years flew by unnoticed, and all his children had long since grown up. Alfred thought that a bright future lay ahead of them. But everything changed with the appearance of monsters. Thanks to his management of the store, he was able to survive the goblin attack. But the situation worsened when it became necessary to conserve every scrap of food and water. After some time, his eldest son and daughter-in-law came to visit him and his wife. Thanks to Anna's awakened alchemical abilities, they no longer had to worry about water, and the situation outside only worsened. The soldiers who had become monsters began to take away civilians. Alfred was very concerned about the safety of his children. It was at this time that he awakened his abilities as an architect. Thus, thanks to the abilities of his daughter-in-law and his own, they were able to survive. And now he has finally met his youngest son. As he approached the store, Mikhail could hardly recognize it as his home, covered with iron sheets and surrounded by spikes. He had barely reached the door when it slowly opened. The hero froze when he saw his parents' faces peering out from the passageway. But the next moment he burst into tears like a child and threw himself into the arms of his family. As the skeleton knights approached them, horror was reflected on the faces of his family members. Mikhail calmed everyone down, explaining that they were not enemies but comrades. And then he opened a portal to his sisters. When they saw their parents, they immediately burst into tears of happiness. A little later, they were all sitting together at the dinner table inside the subspace. Ashley was amazed at the level of food on the table, because she herself was not always able to cook everything so deliciously. She was used to being the best in her field, and now she was not going to accept defeat. Therefore, after thanking Michelle for the treat, she expressed her desire to treat everyone to her signature refreshing dessert. No one had any objections, so Ashley was free to use the kitchen. As she served her tiramisu, she was in a competitive mood and watched Michelle's reaction closely. Just one spoonful caused delight and admiration to appear on the woman's face. Unable to contain herself, Michelle even asked to share the recipe with her, which caused a satisfied reaction from Ashley. Meanwhile, Michael and his brother Steven had long since left the table and were now discussing more important things. Steve gave his brother the power stone he had found, as he had no use for it himself. The hero did not refuse such a gift. Steven couldn't help but notice how much his little brother had matured since they last saw each other. After chatting a little more, Steve decided to return to his family. As soon as his older brother left, Mikhail's face darkened. The scar he noticed on Steven's face told him about his difficult life. Lost in these thoughts, he didn't notice how someone approached him from behind. Therefore, having noticed his father, the hero was very surprised. Alfred admitted that he was now truly happy because his whole family was close by and safe. Mikhail understood him and said that he could not have gone so far alone, even with his incredible ability. Now he understood that regardless of their abilities, they all suffered equally and were afraid of death. Alfred smiled softly as he looked at his son and admitted that he was proud of him. All this time, Gilbert and his guys were poring over the papers, and they only managed to sort out half of them. The man announced a short break, but before he could relax, he received a report that Mikhail had gone to the city of P. Gilbert frowned and tried to figure out why the boy would go there. But as soon as he realized that this was where the main forces of the First Corps were, he was overcome with real horror. While in subspace, Kate trained tirelessly, knocking out all her discontent. Every day the number of pairs in sand she destroyed grew rapidly. Stephen watched this process through the window. He couldn't understand at all why Kate would be so angry. Without looking up from her console, Emma replied that their brother wouldn't let her out, so she was letting off steam. Paula came to her senses and asked Steve about the scar on his face, but he assured her that it no longer bothered him. Emma didn't listen to him and gently touched her brother's cheek, healing the scar. What happened made a strong impression on him. Steve's story about the origin of the scar was interrupted by a message about dinner being ready. Throwing down the console and her brother, Emma immediately jumped up and rushed into the kitchen. Meanwhile, our hero had already reached the desired city and was now actively fighting the enemies. The missiles it fired destroyed military tanks without any difficulty. Michael was not afraid to use such a powerful weapon because he knew that Lancelot had already removed all civilians from the area. By his own calculations, he should have already earned a lot of magic stones for killing goblins. But when he checked the data, he saw that this figure had not increased at all. Here a message appeared that a quarter of the acquired stones was paid to a certain priest. Mikhail did not understand what was being discussed, but the priest's nickname seemed familiar to him. He immediately remembered the information Lancelot had given him about a certain high-level creature. Having compared all the facts, the hero was able to construct a certain picture of what was happening. Soon, a knight appeared before him and informed him that all the camps had been destroyed, and that Bruce was now helping the remaining people escape. When Michael asked him a couple of questions about Thanatos and the priest, the knight was overcome with anxiety. So the hero explained that these two were constantly intercepting the stones he had earned. At the same time, the goblin named Priest was surprised at how quickly magic stones appeared in his account. In addition, powerful explosions were heard around him every now and then, as if coming from nowhere. At some point, one of the missiles pierced his chest. Unable to stay on his feet, the monster immediately fell to the floor. Here Mikhail appeared, out of breath after the long climb. The sight of his enemy's dead body made him think that it was all over, but suddenly the wound began to heal rapidly. Soon the goblin rose to his feet, unharmed and full of strength. He was surprised that the skeleton knight was loyal to a human, and the hero was impressed that the goblin could speak human language. From these words, the priest understood that his enemy had already encountered his soldiers, who quickly ate stones and became goblins. The monster abruptly moved away from this topic, saying that if Mikhail left here and did not destroy anything, then they would not touch him. He was full of confidence that no one in this world could kill him, but he himself could easily do it. The hero was in no hurry to answer, trying to understand the enemy's motives and assess each other's strengths. He was also greatly disturbed by the strange red smoke surrounding everything. Suddenly he noticed how all the smoke was accumulating high in the sky. Immediately, the outline of a huge eye appeared from the smoke. At the sight of this, Mikhail was overcome with horror, and a guess appeared in his head that this was the very same high-level creature. Confirming his guess, the goblin said that the likes of Thanatos had no problem with hierarchical restrictions when moving. He also added that he would be the one who would help Thanatos arrive here personally. But before that, he decided to give our hero one more chance to leave here alive. Without giving the goblin a chance to voice his conditions, Lancelot cut off his head with a precise move. The knight could not allow anyone to subjugate his master. The goblin's head immediately began to fuse with its body, and before the knight stood once again a whole and unharmed enemy. Lancelot knew he couldn't kill him, so he intended to make him beg for death. So he began to strike blow after blow, not giving the goblin a chance to escape. Watching the merciless beating, Mikhail tried to figure out how they could defeat the goblin once and for all. While thinking about the possibility of interrupting the regeneration effect, he suddenly remembered the canceling effect of his subspace. The guy immediately opened the portal and, calling out to Lancelot, told him to throw the goblin inside. The knight fulfilled his request without further questions. An unsuspecting Emma was returning from the kitchen when a portal opened near her. At first, she thought that it was her younger brother who had returned early. It was only when she saw the withered body of the monster that she realized she was wrong and was overcome with horror. If it weren't for the hand that stopped him, the monster would have fallen right on the frightened Emma. Kate, who came to her aid, looked at the monster with a murderous look. And then she turned her gaze towards the portal. Standing outside, Mikhail shuddered when he heard his older sister's terrifying voice. She stepped forward with a sinister smile and swung the goblin's body to throw it. Scared to death, the hero ordered the portal to be closed immediately. Afterwards, he came to his senses and also ordered the monster to be removed from subspace. As soon as this happened, Mikhail again encountered his sister, whose eloquent look spoke of imminent reprisal. At that moment, even Thanatos didn't seem as scary to him as Kate. Soon a message appeared before him about the transfer of the magical stones of the slain goblin to him. The number he saw there, which was just over 10,000 stones, greatly shocked Mikhail. Remembering another enemy, he quickly looked up at the sky, but there was no one else there. Lancelot suggested that this might be because Michael had blocked some connection between the goblin and the monster. Realizing that Thanatos had retreated, and it was all over, the hero fell tiredly to the floor. Even though he wasn't fighting personally, for some reason he felt like he was squeezed out like a lemon. Soon the approaching cries of soldiers were heard. Worried about the boy, Gilbert gathered all the awakened from the available units and came to help, but the enemy had already been defeated. Here Gilbert was informed that there were no survivors among the rebels in this corps. When the man approached Mikhail, asking how he managed to do it, he replied that he was just lucky. Without asking any further questions, Gilbert simply thanked him. The hero, not expecting this, tried to stop the man in confusion, but he interrupted him, admitting his stupidity and asking Mikhail to join the army. And now, struggling with his own awkwardness, the only thing Gilbert could ask for was to help people. Mikhail replied that he had no intention of joining the army, and that whether or not to help someone was only the decision of his own heart. But these words were enough for the man to bring a grateful smile to his face. Gilbert immediately became concerned about the issue of Mikhail being able to receive assistance from the military at any time. Having contacted his people by radio, he announced that the hero had been awarded the rank of colonel. Completely perplexed, Mikhail asked why such measures had to be taken, but the man ignored his question and wished him a good rest. Immediately after this, Gilbert ran to deal with the remaining problems, and the hero suggested that Lancelot return back. If it weren't for the knight's reminder, Michael wouldn't have remembered the abandoned Bruce. In order not to look for the one-armed knight himself, he decided to use the new subspace function, search for objects. But there was a problem with this because the said object was outside a certain distance. Meanwhile, Bruce was able to get inside one of the buildings and find another application for registration of a spatial being. It was in this office that our hero and Lancelot found him among a pile of papers. When Mikhail studied the documents given to him, he had an idea. As soon as he opened the portal, he was confronted by his sister, who was thirsty for his blood. In revenge for what she had gone through, Emma fully supported her older sister in this desire. Before Kate could show her full bloodthirstiness, Mikhail presented her with an application to register the creature. He explained that he didn't let her out because he was worried about her, and with this, she would be able to fight without fear. Overjoyed at his luck, the hero breathed a sigh of relief. His death was delayed, but suddenly Kate said dryly that according to what was written, she needed an account. This was a significant blunder on Mikhail's part, due to which his brilliant idea failed. As soon as he landed on the floor after the blow, he immediately rushed away from his sister, who was seething with rage. At the same moment, a message came from the system that the subspace level had been increased. Noticing the slight tremors of the skeleton knights, Emma chalked it up to anger and told them not to interfere with what was happening. A real worry came over her as she looked at the knights and saw that something strange was happening to them. Kate was desperately trying to strangle her brother when they both heard Emma's screams. At that very moment, they ran up to their sister and the knights who had fallen to the floor, clutching their heads in pain. When Michael asked what was happening, Lancelot answered by saying that his whole body suddenly began to hurt and itch. He also admitted that his body had itched before, but not as much as now. Reflecting on the symptoms, Emma asked if the itchy areas were crusted. Here Kate also remembered that when the monster bit her on the neck, the wound also itched a lot. But after that, everything went away. Her words led Mikhail to the guess that this was all due to the healing effect of the subspace. So now he was confused, because he thought that skeletons were the original form of knights. He was pulled out of his thoughts about his plan of action by Lancelot's weak voice, saying that he felt better in Camelot. Having opened the portal, the hero immediately transported the three of them to Camelot. With their appearance, the blood sacrifice skill was activated, with the help of which enhancing stones are created. Luckily for the hero, 2 stones fell on him at once. Once again, he was torn from his thoughts about the stones by Lancelot's voice, asking for forgiveness for the weakness he had shown. Getting to his feet, Mikhail said that it was his fault that he had been indifferent to them all this time. Therefore, I allowed both knights to stay here when they entered the subspace. Both Lancelot and Bruce were immensely grateful to him. What happened made the hero understand that the life support of the subspace and the Camelot skill can work together. He was confident that this way he would be able to speed up his leveling and develop new skills. The next morning, Kate barely woke up when she received a strange message from the Spatial Chamber of Commerce. But neither she nor Emma understood what kind of upcoming bidding competition they were talking about. Having received such messages, everyone immediately ran to Mikhail for answers. But he barely had time to respond to anything when he received a personal message from the chamber offering him the position of sole representative. Emma was immediately wary because she had never personally received such a message. Stephen realized that since his brother would be representing Seoul, he would have to participate in the bidding. Here Ashley asked what this bidding competition even meant. From the information provided, Steve concluded that they would be competing with alien life forms. What he said left everyone shocked and perplexed. Mikhail understood that he had to do this in order to have the opportunity to learn more about the current situation. When Gilbert learned of his new position, he was shocked. The hero also told him about the requirement to gather 100 people into his team. At this point, the team already included Kate and both knights. After recovering from the initial shock, the man beamed with happiness, because all this time he had been worried about who would be the representative. Afterwards, he handed him the notes that Mikhail needed to look at. The man explained that there was a short list of the awakened and the abilities that were in their army. When the hero said that special class snipers, not necessarily awakened ones, would suit him, Gilbert was surprised. Seeing his bewilderment, Mikhail explained that he knew who their opponent would be, which is why he agreed to this position. After that, he displayed a video message introducing the enemy. The enemy army were loyal followers of the goddess Emes from their dimension. The hero also displayed a list of names of the opponent's participants with ranks. After accepting the position of representative, Mikhail became aware of some more details of the upcoming events in addition to these two. An hour before the start of the bidding, both sides will take their positions and wait for the start of the fight, preparing for it. The enemy will come to the field with their own gate core, which the participants from Earth will need to destroy in order to win. If the core hatches, the Earth will lose. Having explained how everything would happen, Mikhail suggested that the enemies would be vigorously guarding their core. So he decided that Lancelot, Kate, and himself would be responsible for the attack. But he still couldn't solve the problem with the defense. Gilbert understood why Mikhail had asked for snipers, but he was worried that conventional weapons would not work against the enemies. But the hero assured him that there was no need to worry about it. Last night he upgraded several of his abilities, especially the subspace lab. This allowed him to model the characteristics and final appearance of an object before creating it. Mikhail thought for a long time about what kind of weapon he should create. He eventually decided to improve the rifles and ammunition he already had. At first, the hero tried to enhance only ammunition, but after use, the weapon immediately broke. So he came up with the idea of modifying the gun so that it could withstand the shot. The weapon on display delighted Gilbert so much that he immediately set out to prepare a list of snipers. Thus began the week-long preparatory period. While the soldiers were honing their skills, Alfred began building a fortress using his ability. Kate, on the other hand, enhanced her abilities with magic stones, destroying monsters. As a result, she managed to develop her defensive ability and expand its range by several meters. Emma, in turn, learned to use her treatment on specific areas. At this pace of preparation, the allotted time flew by unnoticed, and the decisive day X arrived. An hour before the start of trading, a portal opened at the National Assembly building, and holy knights emerged from it. One of them held the gate core in his hands. Mikhail and his father observed the enemy's actions from their base through a telescope. The first thing that seemed strange to our hero was that they were building not one, but two buildings on their territory. Since there was only an hour left before the auction, he had no idea how they would manage to finish it in that time. But something else caught his attention here. Several knights stopped a few meters from the walls of their base. They conveyed the words of their goddess that the weak would be granted mercy and salvation. Their mercy consisted of tearing out their tongues, and their salvation consisted of hard labor to repent for their misdeeds. The hero was surprised by such cruel words from the Holy Knights, but it did not frighten him at all. After an hour, the captain of the Holy Knights commanded his subordinates to attack. Everyone immediately rushed forward, proclaiming their goddess. Gilbert also ordered his men to open fire. The next moment, a hail of bullets fell upon the Holy Knights. The stunned knights received one wound after another. The commander stepped forward, covering himself with the goddess's holy shield. He urged his men to hold formation and wait for the right moment to break through. In a relatively short period of time, the snipers used up a fifth of their stockpiled weapons. Gilbert reported this to the hero over the radio, who replied that they needed to continue in the same spirit. And then he shouted to Lancelot that it was time for them to start too. The Holy Knight's gaze did not escape the sight of a pair of figures rushing past on motorcycles, but the knights continued to hold the line, moving forward slowly, knowing that the core was under reliable protection. While thinking this, they were completely unaware that on the neighboring rooftop, One-armed Bruce was already swinging his arm to attack them. With one blow, he managed to get rid of one squad of enemies at once. The smoke rising into the air became a sign to our hero that one of his knights had begun to act. By this time, he, Lancelot, and Kate had managed to reach the enemy camp. At first, when he saw the construction that had begun, it seemed pointless to him. But now he was amazed by the speed of the enemy's construction. Opening a portal, he fired several missiles at the goddess statue, assuming that it would not be difficult to destroy it. Only when the smoke cleared, everyone saw that the statue was safe and sound. This fact caused genuine surprise in Mikhail, but the solution to the problem that had arisen came to him quite quickly. He could simply save the statue in subspace. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to the cries of one of the enemies that the Earth was just a pasture for stupid animals. But the hero was not looking at the crazy old man, but at the building behind him, filled with building materials. Mikhail could not resist taking such a valuable structure for himself. Hearing the quiet pop of the warehouse disappearing, the old man and the knights looked back and froze in bewilderment. The hero approached Joshua with an offer to fly a helicopter after a long break. The man, his spirits revived, got ready in a matter of moments. Lancelot and Kate noticed the sudden attack directed at them immediately. Kate held her hand out in front of them, creating a shield. But to her surprise, it immediately dissipated as soon as it came into contact with the spear. Here Lancelot came to her aid, repelling the enemy attack. Kate wondered why her shield couldn't stop the most ordinary spears, given that even Mikhail's bullets were stopped. Lancelot also found it strange, but he assumed that all the enemy's weapons were also reinforced with special technology. The knights were not going to stop at one unsuccessful attempt, but Lancelot again easily repelled the spears. Taking the opportunity, Kate picked one of them up for herself. Once the number of spears flying at them had diminished, Joshua announced that they could take off. This allowed them to rise above the statue without hindrance. While in the sky, Michael opened a portal to subspace, dropping blessed materials from an enemy warehouse down. The statue's protection could not withstand this, and it was completely destroyed. Somewhere under its rubble, a bloody mess spilled out, which had previously been the enemy's core. After declaring victory, the attacking team received a reward in the form of magic stones and access to the dimensional account. While everyone was filling in their login details, a document suddenly appeared in front of Mikhail too. After studying it, he realized that these were the rights to conduct business in the R dimension. Here a red portal opened in front of them. None of them knew what kind of portal it was, but the hero assumed that it was somehow connected with business rights. But when he tried to get inside, he couldn't, because he was not a registered entrepreneur. Without understanding anything, Mikhail reread the document again. At that very moment, another message appeared offering to sell their rights to the Chamber of Commerce for 10,000 stones. On the one hand, such an offer seemed very tempting, but he wasn't going to follow anyone's lead, so he rejected it. Michael simply could not watch the Chamber of Commerce, having suffered a defeat, now try to profit from him. To his father's worried question, the hero said that this portal was useless, and they had nothing to worry about. Since there was nothing else to do here, Emma decided to return to treating the wounded. Kate decided to kill time by throwing spears, and Alfred and Joshua decided to return to subspace. Upon returning, Alfred froze in delight, noticing the many new building materials. The hero, of course, saw this, and reported that there was also an endless supply of this. This news made the man even more delighted. In the evening, everyone received the results of the past bidding competition, and for Earth, they were quite dismal. Looking at the statistics of individual battles, Mikhail noted that among the battles fought there were too many victories for the enemy. Suddenly, Gilbert proposed to go to the city of Yi, which had been defeated, and quickly reorganize the troops. Their meeting was interrupted by a soldier who entered. He transmitted an urgent radiogram to Gilbert from the city of Ai. It contained information collected by the troops during the recent battle. Their enemy was the Lizardmen, whose gates were now open in the Charia. During the clash with them, the artillery brigade and air defense were destroyed in just an hour. It was also known that now, after the battle had ended, the Lizardmen troops were still continuing to emerge from the gate. When the man finished, Mikhail suggested that the monsters intended to head straight to Seoul, but Joshua found this assumption strange and illogical. Only Lancelot noticed the pattern between the city of Yi and Seoul, where our hero was now. Suddenly, Mikhail received another message that the title of the winning representative of Earth would be displayed above his head. Everyone immediately looked up at the guy, trying to find the inscription, but it was not there, which raised many questions. Mikhail himself raised his head, confirming this fact. Lancelot was also racking his brains trying to find an answer to the question that had arisen. The new message that only a few would be allowed to use the portals installed here infuriated Kate, and the next piece of news horrified everyone. In order to create additional portals, it was necessary to kill a representative of the given region. Amid all this news, Gilbert noted as a good sign the absence of a sign above Mikhail's head. At this moment, Lancelot was finally able to fully comprehend the situation. To confirm his guess, he climbed out of the window. A huge sign representing Soul hung in the sky directly above the building. Soon everyone else came out onto the street too and saw this sign. Kate thought something that size would be perfect for baiting the lizardmen. In this whole situation, Mikhail found it strange that the monsters began to regroup even before the end of the auction. Also troubling was the sudden new rule, which made it seem as if the monsters knew what was coming. Lancelot thought the same thing, and assumed that the enemy, having rich experience, could guess what rules would be introduced. Kate suggested that as a way out of the situation they should simply go into subspace. But Lancelot supposed that such a trifle would not be able to stop their enemy from achieving his goal. Thinking about this, Michael suggested luring the enemy to a place where they would have an advantage. Gilbert found the idea tolerable, but was concerned about the time it would take to prepare. Joshua intervened here, assuring that he would be able to ensure quick movement, and clarified where to go. This is where the problem arose. The hero had not yet had time to think about this point. Looking for a promising place where they could operate without attracting attention, he remembered the bridge where he had fought the hounds. The location of the bridge was convenient due to the limited space for movement, which gave an advantage. That is why it was in that area that our heroes began to build their base. During this process, it was discovered that along with the stockpile of materials from the previous enemy, their weapons were also preserved. So it was decided that in the upcoming battle, Kate and Bruce would attack with spears. The base frame was erected fairly quickly, and several hundred shooters were immediately placed there. A barricade of spikes was also erected around the building. Michael was happy, thinking that everything was going much better than expected. But, as it turned out later, they missed several important things. Their enemies, the lizards, were excellent swimmers, and the river under the bridge was the best place to approach the base unnoticed. Also, the bushes around the river grew thicker than expected, which also gave the enemy access to unnoticed movement on land. Bruce stood on the very roof, watching the bridge, but a sudden sound behind him made him turn around. The situation turned out completely differently than they had expected. The enemy appeared in the air. A loud cry about the enemy's approach made Mikhail look back and see a multitude of monsters approaching. He couldn't hide his bewilderment at how close the enemy had gotten. The snipers immediately opened fire. The lizard men, who were not expecting such an attack, all began to fall to the ground. Some people still managed to avoid injury and continue on their way, but they began to be pelted with construction beams. A sharp crash that came from the other side made Mikhail turn around again. The next moment, a huge lizard appeared from there with a loud cry that no one could stop him. Just as he was about to release a magical attack from his mouth, a metal beam flew at his head. The monster easily pulled it out, screaming that the blow was too weak. Everything was going completely wrong, and panic was slowly beginning to envelop our hero's mind. Lancelot, however, was extremely wary, assessing the enemy's strength. Besides this monster, he felt the enemy's strong aura coming from the other side as well. Therefore, he suggested that Mikhail take on the first thug, but he himself decided to take on the other enemy. The next moment he rushed at the monster, but he managed to hold back his swift attack with his spear. When Lancelot stopped a few meters away from him, Tiger told his men to ignore it and continue their battle. He was going to deal with the knight himself. All this time, the military tried hard to prevent the enemy from getting too close to the base, but one of the monsters was too agile and still managed to break through. The soldiers stationed around the perimeter immediately ran to their wounded comrade, trying to stop the invasion. Suddenly, a spear pierced the riding lizard, causing the monster to fall back to the ground. Kate followed him down and finished off the enemy. She then shouted to the soldiers to take care of those trying to enter the building, and that they should continue firing. Emma was busy treating the wounded. Bruce was actively getting rid of enemies in the sky, but even he alone found it difficult to cope with so many. Our hero's battle was also in full swing. The only thing Mikhail managed to do was distract the monster. He didn't know what to do next. He didn't have time to wait for anyone's help, and he wanted to be able to help Lancelot. When he looked back to see the progress of his knight's battle, he was surprised to see the monster holding a spear. Tiger tried hard to hit his opponent, but he dodged the blow every time. Looking up at Lancelot with displeasure, he asked how long he intended to run away instead of fighting like a warrior. The knight wanted to respond to this provocation, but he saw that Tiger was not so simple. He was especially concerned about the lizard's weapon, which was also endowed with unusual properties. To test his guess, he asked if this weapon was made in the same dimension where the holy knights came from. But Tiger replied that it was a spear from his own dimension, but it was improved by those knights. Hoping that this trick would work, Lancelot asked if the spear was just used to hide Tiger's lack of skill. Such an obvious provocation was uncovered by the lizard almost immediately, and plunged him into a rage. This time, Lancelot didn't have time to dodge and had to block the blow. His counterattack failed to hit Tiger, and the next moment the monster raised his spear for the decisive blow. Only at the last moment he stopped abruptly. No matter how hard the monster tried, the weapon in his hands refused to obey his will. As soon as his grip loosened, the spear slipped from his hands. And then it disappeared into our hero's portal. Michael decided to try this method, but he didn't think it would really work. For a few moments Tiger didn't move, just frozen in shock. But as soon as the realization of what had happened reached him, he was overcome with anger that someone had dared to insult the duel between two warriors. He couldn't help but express his opinion about what a vile creature Lancelot's master was. He responded by saying that Tiger was simply afraid because his weapon had been taken away. To make the fight more equal, the knight also abandoned his sword and decided to fight hand to hand. Tiger accepted his new challenge. The hero no longer cared about their battle. He was completely captivated by his new weapon. Tiger's spear was imbued with divine properties, making its penetration and acceleration power several times greater. When Michael's continuous series of attacks stopped, the monster believed that the boy had finally recognized his strength and became afraid. The lizard was delighted with his unrivaled abilities, considering himself more powerful than anyone in the world. At one of these moments, his right palm was pierced by several spears. Not without surprise, the lizard recognized these spears as the weapons of his partner, Tiger. As the spears began to pierce his legs, the monster could no longer maintain his balance and fell to the ground. The next couple of blows to the head were his last. For defeating the enemy, the hero received a strengthening stone, an impressive amount of magic stones. Kay also managed to successfully get rid of those who wanted to get inside. A sudden scream from a monster somewhere above caught her attention. Only now did she realize that she had forgotten about Bruce left on the roof. When Kate came upstairs, the knight informed her that she was late, and there was no one left. The fight between Lancelot and Tiger was also nearing its end. The lizard was badly beaten and could no longer resist. Before finishing everything, Lancelot asked if he had anything to say in the end. But Tiger only said that it was a great duel. He could say no more. Lancelot dealt the finishing blow. So this difficult battle was finally over. But the real end was still far away, because the gates of the monsters were still open, and the lizards would return again. To find out more information about the enemy, including the location of their gates, the hero had to return to the city of Y. There, soldiers were already waiting for him, ready to carry out any order. Michael still felt awkward when he was saluted. Martin stepped forward and announced that he was a lieutenant colonel in the operational headquarters of the 17th Division. Afterwards, he conveyed the words of the chief that he was unable to come because he had to return back to headquarters due to urgent matters. Mikhail already knew this, because he himself saw how Gilbert hastily left after receiving the radiogram. To continue the conversation, Martin suggested moving to a more comfortable place. There the man said that they knew the location of the enemy gate, but there was a problem with the gate core. In addition, it became known that not long ago, substances similar to dirt began to spread from the gate. It was too difficult to explain everything in words, so Martin decided it would be easier to show it. Then he put a couple of photos of the contaminated area on the table. Looking at the photo, Mikhail found a striking resemblance between this strange mud and a swamp. Having opened the gate, he informed Martin that he had acquaintances who would not be bothered by such a thing. But when Lancelot was shown the photo, he said that fighting in such terrain would be too difficult. He explained that it wouldn't be a problem for them to move around in ghost form, but they would be too easy to spot. It was precisely this important detail that Mikhail had not thought about. But the knight hastened to reassure him, saying that he had a friend who worked quickly and unnoticed. Michael was undoubtedly interested in the opportunity that had arisen. So, having spent 500 stones, he summoned another knight. Soon Silas, one of the 12 knights of Camelot, appeared before them. He differed from the other knights in that he was not often active on the battlefield. Instead, he operated in enemy territory using his skills in stealth, assassination, and theft. Stealth helped him become invisible to any creature. This is how he managed to gain the status of a genius assassin. His skills were indeed ideal for the current situation, so the hero let him in on the plan for the upcoming operation. Just before the operation began, Lancelot warned Silas that their enemies were not ordinary guys. Martin was worried whether a single knight could cope with such a difficult task. The hero assured him that his guys were the best of the best, and that he could definitely rely on them. As soon as Silas left, he let Lancelot go to rest. Since the knight was not human, he did not feel tired, which he told the boy. Suddenly, Mikhail noticed the many scratches on his armor that had appeared during the battles. He wanted to offer Lancelot to change his armor, but he said that everything would be restored on its own as soon as he returned to Camelot. Mikhail didn't even suspect that the lock had this function, so he was very surprised. The knight also said that a new power-up stone with the option to regenerate wounds had recently appeared in Camelot. Suddenly, in the middle of the conversation, he caught a quiet rustle and grabbed his sword. Then he sternly said that someone was hiding here and eavesdropping on them. Becoming wary, Mikhail began to look around, trying to guess which of the enemies it might be. Lancelot clarified that he only sensed someone else's presence and did not know the exact position of the enemy. Noticing someone's figure behind one of the cars, he broke off mid-sentence. The knight quickly said that he would be back in a minute and disappeared, leaving a bewildered Mikhail alone. With the hero left defenseless, the lurking enemy saw this as a good opportunity to take action, but a blade that suddenly appeared made him stop. Lancelot did not kill him, deciding to ask a few questions first. A scream of horror heard nearby attracted Mikhail's attention. Running towards the sound, he was confused when he saw Lancelot pressing some guy against the truck. The knight explained that this man was the spy, and then he went back to the guy, giving him one last chance to answer all the questions in a good way. But instead of the expected answers, the stranger croaked out Mikhail's name. He told Lancelot that this guy was his old friend. The knight, who had not expected this at all, was greatly shocked. Meanwhile, Silas had already managed to reach the contaminated enemy territory unnoticed. Thanks to his unrivaled camouflage, he was even able to infiltrate a building full of monsters. While here, the knight noticed every detail and analyzed the enemy. Lost in thought, he barely managed to dodge the alien thorns. If he had hesitated for a second, he would have had every chance of being caught. A quarter of an hour later, he managed to find the room with a cannonball. The old man sitting next to him, a practitioner of magic, clearly expressed his dissatisfaction with the company imposed on him. Suddenly, another voice came from above, reminding the old man of their agreement. Daniel remembered everything perfectly, including the fact that he had only promised to protect the core, and not to entertain it. And then he made a caustic remark to his interlocutor that he should not be worrying about the core, but about his dead subordinates. Suddenly, the interlocutor's cold tail wrapped around the magician's neck. The huge lizard reminded him of the place he occupied, and that he could be killed at any moment. When Daniel admitted that he had overreacted, the grip on his neck loosened. Watching what was happening inside the room, Silas did not even notice the monster approaching him. The huge chameleon felt something pressing against his leg, although he could not see anyone. This could not help but give rise to certain suspicions. Silas noticed too late the alien tongue flying past him, and then he was thrown with all his might into the wall. His invisibility immediately began to wear off, revealing his presence to everyone. The roar that followed attracted the attention of Daniel and the lizard. Having discovered the enemy, the old man used magic to pull one of the scrolls towards himself. With a precise action, he tore the paper, sending a bolt of magic towards Silas. Returning to Mikhail and Alex, they met back in high school. Alex kept picking on the hero because of his shabby and old uniform, making fun of him. One day, Mikhail couldn't take it anymore, and it all ended in a fight. So Alex switched to games, loudly shouting about his opportunities and money. It quickly became obvious that he was trying to get the attention of his friends in this way. They didn't understand the reasons why Alex bragged about his money every now and then, and even began to make fun of him. So one day, the senior school kids became interested in him. When they took the console away, Alex tried to object to them, but it all ended with him being beaten. Just at this moment, Mikhail intervened in what was happening. But this was not an act of justice, but a desire to show Alex, who constantly humiliated him, that he was not a weakling. Ultimately, the hero quickly regretted this decision because he also got beaten up. Luckily for him, Kate heard about the fight that had started in time and intervened. It was on this day that Mikhail first learned that his sister was widely known at this school. And on that same day, she forced him to join their sports club. So he acquired protection not only from his sister, but also from her friends at the club. After that day, throughout high school, she and Alex became closer. Their communication continued even in high school, and then they entered the same university together. The day he remembers most from his time at university was when Alex announced his desire to take up fencing. He explained this by saying that he became envious of watching his friend train with his sister, and decided to take up sports as well. At that time, this news greatly shocked Mikhail. And now, several years later, Alex once again hit him with the shocking news that he had awakened as a swordsman. Seeing his friend's reaction, Alex admitted that he himself was no less shocked that he had become a representative of Soul. All this time, Lancelot stood in a strange stance, punishing himself for the mistake he had made, which greatly irritated Alex. But the hero could not influence this in any way, because the knight did it voluntarily. So they continued their conversation, in which Mikhail casually asked how Alex's mother was doing. At this question, the guy became noticeably sad, saying that he didn't know about this. Meanwhile, Maria, Alex's mother, survived alone, locked in an office building. But a sudden noise outside caught her attention. Lancelot broke the window and entered. He told the frightened woman that he had been sent by her son's friend and promised to escort him to a safe place. Alex previously revealed that after the apocalypse began, he was separated from his mother by a transparent barrier due to a bidding competition. He volunteered to join the soldiers to see his mother again, but their army was defeated. After this, the barrier disappeared. But instead, the transfer of the environment from the alien dimension to this one began. For this reason, Alex didn't even know if his mother was alive. So, to make amends, Lancelot volunteered to find his mother. Suddenly, on his way back, he noticed the approaching figure of Silas. He, without slowing down, shouted that they needed to get out of here as quickly as possible. Due to the complete lack of explanation, Lancelot completely did not understand the reasons for such a rush. But soon he saw a crowd of angry monsters running after Silas. Now the full horror of the situation dawned on him. When Silas returned and ran towards him, he coldly asked how many of the enemies were of high rank. The knight did not have this information, which made the situation even more tense. Having sensibly assessed the enemy's strength, he told Silas to return to Michael and report everything he had learned and seen. He also conveyed his rescue mission to him. Finally, he asked me to convey to Mikhail the words that the healing strengthening stone would be perfect for Arnold. Without asking any further questions, Silas set off. Lancelot himself made the difficult decision to stay and hold back the enemy. He was confident in his abilities as a defender of Camelot, and was ready to face a large army of monsters. In the shortest possible time, Silas returned to Mikhail together with Maria, and reported on the successful completion of the mission. At the sight of his mother, Alex involuntarily burst into tears, while Mikhail had a strange, bad feeling. Soon the shocking news of Lancelot's death appeared before him. When they were alone, Silas told him what had happened and how Lancelot had sacrificed himself. But the knight did not die in the usual sense, but turned back into stone. Michael could restore it, but it was not so easy. Coming to his senses, Silas relayed Lancelot's words about who should receive the empowering stone. Michael thanked the knight for his work, and asked him to tell him what else he had managed to learn. The monsters brought the remains of the armor along with the strengthening stone and handed them over to Daniel. Studying the armor, the old man tried to understand whether there was a sorcerer or a lich on the side of their enemy, controlling this knight. The lizard that appeared praised him for managing to mow down the enemy army by getting rid of just one warrior. The mage glanced at him and asked what he was going to do with the amplifying stone. He admitted that he wanted to hand it over to one of his generals, but both were killed. Then Daniel asked to give the stone to him. In exchange for this, he was ready to offer one of the improved magic scrolls. Scrolls like these allowed non-magicians to use magic and were worth a fortune. So he was confident that the deal would be successful. But the lizard thought differently and considered such scrolls disgusting, since living beings were needed to create them. While rejecting the deal, he said that he would use the stone when dealing with the guys from the Eames dimension. The magician did not hide his dissatisfaction with this decision. Suddenly a scream caught their attention, and soon the enemy himself appeared at the entrance. The name of this knight was Arnold, the very one Lancelot spoke of. It took the old man a moment to realize that this guy had come to avenge his friend. So he used the fire scroll to attack the knight. But thanks to his powerful shield and healing ability, this attack did not cause him any harm at all. The magician had no intention of stopping, deciding to test the enemy's strength. He wanted to summon another scroll, but saw all his scrolls being absorbed into the portal. Having received all the scrolls, Michael informed the knight that he could finish everything. When this order reached Arnold, he handed over the right to kill the old man to Silas. The magician became even more perplexed upon hearing the unfamiliar name, but he never heard the answer to his question, because the next moment Silas cut off his head. The snake cast an attentive glance at the knight. Earlier he had sensed someone else's presence, but had not attached any importance to it. Now I realized that it was a mistake. With the gate's core left unprotected, Arnold rushed towards it. But at the very last moment he was stopped. The lizard's powerful tail threw him back. There was no chance to miss, so Silas decided to destroy the core instead of his partner. But the lizard threw him aside, angrily hissing that the poison should not be touched. Then, in order to protect the core, he swallowed it in his mouth and escaped, punching a hole in the wall. As he made his way outside, his eyes immediately fell on the sign, "Representative of Soul," floating in the air above the helicopter. Sitting inside, Mikhail shuddered in surprise. A monster was approaching them at breakneck speed, its mouth wide open to swallow them all in one go. But the hero already knew how to resist this. So he opened a portal and released several metal beams into it. With this attack, he caused the monster to fall to the ground with a crash. But this was not enough to kill him. With his tail, he easily pulled the beam out of his neck and threw it aside. During this time, Mikhail managed to see his enemy, who turned out to be a huge snake. Not giving the snake a chance to attack again, he sent beams at it again. This time the monster knew what to expect, and thanks to its incredible speed was able to avoid the blows. So he managed to escape and climb the building to find himself on the same level as the enemy. The next moment, poisonous mucus flew towards the helicopter. Once it hit the glass surface, it began to rapidly corrode it, causing Joshua to become horrified. To avoid an unexpected accident, Mikhail had to open a portal and go into subspace. They soon returned with a refurbished and strengthened helicopter. The snake watched them with surprise, trying to figure out what kind of ability this was. Mikhail was not afraid of repeated poisonous attacks, because he knew he could always transfer to a new helicopter. But what worried him was that the beams were of no use against this monster. After some thought, he decided to take a risk and send a spear at the snake. At first glance, he recognized the spear of his commander, Tiger, and became even more perplexed. Right there, a second one of the same kind pierced his body. While he was trying to understand where the enemy got 2 tiger spears from, Mikhail was already preparing the next attack. This time it wasn't just a spear, it was enhanced with second-tier ice magic. Having also recognized the magic of the deceased Daniel, the snake's surprise increased. He was not going to let the enemy hurt him anymore and instead rushed towards the helicopter himself. But as soon as he reached his goal, the hero disappeared into the portal again. After his disappearance, a soul representative sign appeared in the sky again, revealing his location. Thanks to this, the snake guessed that the enemy had simply gone into another space and connected it with all past attacks. When the portal opened again, the snake's face showed surprise. Michael and all his friends stood on the other side, holding magic scrolls in their hands. On command, he opened the scroll at the same time as the others. Several dozen ice spears immediately flew at the monster. Due to its gigantic size, it could not withstand the hail of rushing spears. When the kite fell, Michael ordered the system to get another helicopter. They quickly climbed inside with Jasper and flew back out. Due to the freezing effect of the spears, the snake had difficulty moving, giving the hero a perfect opportunity to attack. With a sharp movement, Mikhail opened the helicopter door and summoned the portal again. By this time, his friends had managed to arm themselves with new scrolls, and at his command, a variety of magical attacks flew at the monster. Each of them hit their target, striking the monster's body. Once everything was finished, Michael climbed onto the body of the motionless snake and asked for what purpose they had invaded here. He wheezed that it would be difficult for the hero to understand this now. Afterwards, he explained that this dimension was too close to others, and soon Mikhail himself would hunt for other dimensions. This was the last thing he managed to say before his death. The hero tried to comprehend the monster's words when Silas reminded him that the gate's core was still intact and inside the serpent. But for the knights, who were used to cutting up corpses, this fact was not a problem. Therefore, they took on the role of those who would extract the core from the body of the dead enemy and destroy it. A quarter of an hour later, Silas returned with the 3 power stones left behind by Lancelot's death. Having taken the stones, Michael, without hesitation, called his knight back. Lancelot appeared and again swore to the hero his faithful and devoted service. At the same time, the entire area was cleared and returned back to the possession of the earth. When this happened, Michael thanked Lancelot, saying that it was only thanks to him that this was possible. The knight found it difficult to accept this gratitude, because he believed that he had done what he was obliged to do. Hearing the sound of an approaching helicopter engine, the hero looked up at the sky. Mikhail was used to Gilbert coming at such moments, and now it was strange for him to see Martin. He reported to the man what had happened and said that the area had been cleared of monsters. When Michael returned back to subspace, a whole feast was arranged there. He was amazed at the variety of Chinese cuisine here, while monsters roamed the streets. As it turned out later, it all started after Maria was saved. Having learned about the unlimited supply of ingredients, she was eager to repay them for saving her with a delicious dinner. So her other chef from a famous Chinese restaurant was invited here. He was happy to have the opportunity to cook for people even in such difficult and dangerous times. The dishes were so delicious that Kate devoured everything without even chewing. Michelle and Ashley ate slowly, carefully analyzing the dish. As it turned out later, besides defeating the monsters, they had another reason to celebrate. Emma noticed that Anne, Stephen's wife, hardly ate, and that her complexion was unhealthy. Therefore, I was concerned about her condition and asked if everything was okay with her. Suddenly, Emma had a hunch, which she decided to test by asking the girl a couple of questions. Anna's face showed surprise when Emma said she might be pregnant. After conducting several tests, Stephen and Anna told everyone the good news about the addition to their family. Mikhail and his sisters have already begun to discuss the list of things necessary for the child, and even the training program. But along with the good news, there was also bad news. A radio message informed the hero that pollution from alien dimensions continued to spread. For this reason, toxic gases emanating from the gates of Beijing have now begun to reach them. Along with this, a large part of the waters became polluted due to the gates located in Japan. But the problems didn't end there. Many huge monster bugs have appeared in Korea. So Gilbert decided that their first priority was to help China get rid of their gates. Mikhail understood the seriousness of the situation, and understood that he could not help but take part in it. While pondering a plan of action, he suggested heading straight to China without an invitation. So it was decided to leave that very evening. Before leaving, he returned Alex back to the area he needed and said goodbye, promising to meet again one day. So, by helicopter, together with Joshua, Mikhail went straight to the international airport. The captain of the 3rd Guards Brigade, Pavel, was already waiting for them there, and Gilbert brought him up to date. Having led the hero inside, he reported that they had already prepared the necessary means of flight. But since not all the modifications had been completed yet, Pavel asked to wait a little, after which preparations for the flight would begin. When Joshua asked about the modifications, the man explained that due to the risk of encountering monsters, they had to improve this plane. When Mikhail learned that only one person was currently working on the reconstruction of the plane, he was very surprised. Soon they all saw James emerge from the plane, covered in mud, his work finally finished. Later, he led our heroes to the side, telling them in detail about the measurements he had taken. With each passing moment, Mikhail became convinced that this man's abilities were truly extraordinary. After checking the plane, the hero distributed food and other supplies to the locals as a token of gratitude. He shared some of the supplies with James, but the mechanic was not at all interested in this and refused everything that was offered. During this short time, Mikhail managed to understand that James could only be interested in mechanisms, and this guess turned out to be correct, because at the sight of drones in subspace, interest lit up in his eyes. Mikhail undoubtedly wanted to recruit him, so he thought for a long time about how to lure him. He eventually decided to ask the man directly if he wanted to go with him. As arguments, he said that he had a large amount of food and many different cars. Even before he had finished listening to the guy, James sharply replied that he was not interested. He couldn't just trust a person he had known for no more than 2 hours. Mikhail was completely unprepared for such an answer, but he didn't lose his composure, and admitted that he only suggested it because their abilities would go well together. When he, having given up trying to persuade James, decided to say goodbye to him, he was stopped by the mechanic's voice. James agreed to go with him only if Michael planned to go to America. The hero doubted the answer because the road to America from here was not close. To understand why the man was drawn there, he asked if he had family there. The mechanic had no family, but there was a place where he definitely wanted to return. Mikhail honestly said that it is possible to do this, but now it is very difficult, because after China he will go to Japan. But James was quite happy with this and was willing to wait a little. To seal their agreement, Mikhail decided to give the mechanic a small gift. The next moment, several dozen units of various equipment fell nearby. Having said that James could take these cars apart and put them back together as he liked, he said goodbye to the mechanic. Looking at all this equipment, the mechanic was completely bewildered and confused. If he had known about the guy's ability earlier, he would have immediately gone after him. Upon arrival in Beijing, the hero's eyes were immediately struck by the huge number of beetles that covered the houses. Disgusted by insects, Michael felt the urge to fight lizards again instead of beetles. When Joshua landed, he immediately opened the portal and the plane drove inside. Soon the portal opened again and Lancelot came out. Mikhail, dressed in a protective suit, immediately followed him out. Noticing their appearance, locals came out to meet them and called for help. Together they reached a hotel located nearby. Entering the room last, William checked to make sure no monsters were following them. Mikhail did not react to his apologies for the poor conditions. He was distracted by something else. Mikhail was greatly surprised by the exhausted state of the practitioners sitting in the circle. William approached and told the hero that there was no poison in the air here because they cleanse it with their internal energy. This ability was given only to those awakened from Murim and was taught in various private schools in China. When monsters appeared in the world, awakened ones also appeared among the members of martial arts schools. Their abilities were different from those of ordinary awakened ones. They began to use a special energy, called internal, in battles, and such fighters were able to quickly gain recognition. For this reason, the Chinese government gathered all such people and demanded that they defeat the monsters. William, known for his excellent swordsmanship, was appointed leader of these warriors. The swordsman also said that 2 competitions were held in China, of which he lost to the Beelzebub dimension. The main reason for the loss was the lack of information about the enemy using toxic gas. Ordinary awakened ones who did not know how to use their internal energy died instantly. The Murimians were able to resist the poisonous gas, but it was impossible to fight, which is why the monster's gates were able to open. Realizing that the problem was the poison accumulated in the air, Mikhail asked if their exhausted condition would improve in the fresh air. As soon as he received the answer, he jumped up from his seat. Having opened the portal, he asked to wait for him for a couple of minutes. The hero found cans of canned clean air in the warehouse, and was now trying to figure out how to use them more effectively. Feeling a strong gust of wind, the practitioners sitting in meditation were thrown out of their state of equilibrium. The wind currents passed through the entire building in a powerful wave, extending beyond its boundaries. After taking a few deep breaths, one of the men realized with surprise that the air was free of toxins. All his brothers felt the same. William was completely perplexed as he watched the others' conditions suddenly begin to improve. Trying to understand the reason for what was happening, he raised his tense gaze to the portal opened by Mikhail. He suddenly remembered the day when he had desperately asked Korea for help, reporting poison gas and bugs. He didn't expect that they would actually get help, but they responded quickly and even promised to send their colonel as soon as possible. At that time, William was arrogant and did not believe that just one person could resolve such a difficult situation. Now, having realized what was happening, he realized his mistake. William was quick to apologize for the bias and thank him for his help. The hero felt very awkward seeing people bowing to him, so he asked the man to stand up. He thanked him again and said that now, thanks to the fresh air, their energy began to accumulate and strengthen. Afterwards, he suggested taking a short break and meeting early in the morning in a couple of days to discuss the plan of action. Mikhail had nothing against it, and even shared an idea on how to make the holiday as enjoyable as possible. So the hero transferred everyone to subspace and fed them a delicious fresh dinner. A refreshed William simply could not contain his delight, but the short moment of rest quickly passed, and it was time to discuss plans for getting rid of the bugs. First, William gave everyone a detailed explanation of all the types of insects they might encounter, and which ones produce the most toxins. He also reported that the enemy has not one, but 2 gates through which the monsters arrive. At some point, Lancelot, standing by the window, noticed a strange movement outside and immediately tensed up. He immediately informed Mikhail about the enemy that had appeared. Instead of the expected beetles, this time their enemy was a giant centipede. Thanks to its many legs, this monster moved unnaturally fast. Mikhail shuddered with disgust at the sight of her. William approached and said that this monster was level 8 and quite strong. But for some reason unknown to him, the centipede was much inferior to the grasshoppers and hornets. Hearing about the appearance of a strong monster, Kate warmed up and asked not to touch this monster until she dealt with it herself. She was tired of sitting on the couch all day, so she decided to relieve the accumulated stress in this way. The hero did not object to her desire, knowing how useless this activity was, and even supported her zeal. He told William about his sister's monstrous strength and asked him not to worry about her. It was only when the man reminded him about the toxic gas in the air that Mikhail realized his mistake. Kate was already running at full speed towards the monster. With her first attack, she pinned the centipede's head to the ground. Action had to be taken quickly, so William decided to send his student to help Kate. He decided to take on the monster himself. They were all distracted from these important discussions by a scream that was heard outside the window. They ran out onto the balcony, trying to figure out what was happening outside. With just one blow, Kate managed to destroy this centipede. William and his student were shocked by her strength, because even they, masters of their craft, would have had to put in a lot of effort. The swordsman suddenly had a hunch that Keith had the body skill of a heavenly warrior. When Kate collapsed to the ground from the toxins, a worried William immediately sent help to her. Soon after, they all returned to discussing the plan to break through the bug portal. As a result of the discussion, a deadline of 3 days was set for the destruction of the enemy gates. William warned that the closer they got to the gate, the more aggressive the insects would become. To minimize losses and increase the chances of success, he offered to teach the heroes some of Muram's techniques. But before that, they will need to go through a duel with his student, Alexia, to determine their level. Kate was grateful for their assistance, but she didn't understand why William was going so far. Alexia explained that in order to successfully close the gate, each of them would have to give it their all. After some thought, Kate decided to fight her first. During the fight, both girls did not hold back, fighting with full force. If William was delighted by this, the hero, accustomed to such a spectacle since childhood, did not find anything special in this battle. But when the swordsman admitted that he wanted Kate to focus on fencing, Mikhail was surprised. William explained that fencing was his specialty, and even offered to teach Michael the art himself. But the hero was not interested in this at all. Instead, he said he could bring his friend, who also loved swords. So Alex, completely by chance, ended up training with one of the best swordsmen in China. At the same time, Kate learned many techniques from Alexia and adapted them to herself. The speed of her learning was so high that it seemed to Mikhail that she was born already being one of the masters. While everyone was learning something new, the hero also decided not to sit still, and decided to create a weapon that would be effective against bugs. He found the electric beetle trap to be the most suitable for this purpose. The only problem was that it would be useless against most large insects. Due to the lack of proper knowledge in this area, it was difficult for Mikhail to come up with something else that would work. While he was thinking about creating a poison for beetles, an unexpected guest appeared in his laboratory. Anna heard all his ideas spoken out loud, and offered her help in creating the poison. At first, Mikhail did not understand how she was going to help him, but then he remembered that his daughter-in-law had the ability of an alchemist. Having decided to accept her help, the hero asked to make a super powerful poison capable of destroying any creature. After 3 days of preparation, our heroes joined forces and began to implement their plan. As the enemy appeared on the horizon, William shouted for everyone to prepare for battle. He assumed that they would go all out and destroy these insects once and for all. But he was not aware of Mikhail's plans. In 3 days, he and Anna managed to complete the poison for the monsters, and now they were slowly dying under the influence of the poison. Our hero arrived at the battle site last, along with Lancelot, and immediately noted the effectiveness of his remedy. The only downside was that it didn't work on high-level bugs. A few days before, William said that their goal would be the highest mountain, where the cores are located. William admitted that he had attempted to destroy the core before, but each time he was faced with a large army of beetles. But enough time had passed since then, and now he did not know what types of beetles lived there now. The hero was not frightened by this, because he arrived here prepared for anything, having reliable allies at hand. He was really prepared for a lot, but the giant-sized grasshopper made him nervous. Its size and the strength of its blows left no doubt that it had a higher level than other beetles. As he thought about this, the hero remembered Lancelot's words about using sacrifices to level up. All the monsters he had encountered before devoured other life forms and their magic stones, even without the necessary intelligence. It was now becoming obvious that the grasshopper in front of them had leveled up in the same way. Having opened the portal, Mikhail attacked it with many heavy beams, but they couldn't even scratch the grasshopper. Lancelot immediately suggested changing weapons to the holy spears of the lizards. Kate couldn't stand still any longer and ran forward. While Michael was trying to stop his sister, Lancelot noticed something. He peered closely at the tree trunks, trying to understand why they were moving. The realization of what was happening reached him too late. A strange rumble behind him made Mikhail turn around slowly, already sensing danger. The heroes found themselves surrounded by 2 giant monsters, a grasshopper and a spider. Lancelot quickly came up with a plan and suggested climbing onto the spider's head. The knight explained that this monster would not be able to reach its head with its paws, and it would be difficult for other insects to get there. They had no other ideas, so Mikhail ordered everyone to climb onto the spider's head. Thanks to their airborne gait, this was not difficult for them to do. Soon everyone found themselves on the spider's head to think about their next plan of action. Kate admitted that she managed to hit the grasshopper with a spear, but its shell was too hard. All this time the grasshopper stared at the spider. At one point he suddenly jumped forward, terrifying everyone. The heroes hurried to leave the monster's head to save their own lives. Without any difficulty, the grasshopper bit through the spider's head and began to devour it. Michael was stunned by what happened. He thought that these monsters were allies and would not attack each other. But as it turned out, the hero overestimated their intelligence. So he quickly came up with a new plan and shouted for everyone to jump on the grasshoppers' heads. Taking advantage of the moment, everyone easily climbed onto the monster. Michael remained wary, praying that the grasshopper would not reveal their location. Having dealt with the spider, the grasshopper began to look around. Realizing that they were safe, Mikhail was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. He decided not to rush and said that they should wait for a moment and destroy the gate core. He didn't manage to finish speaking, because suddenly something caught the grasshopper's attention, and he ran forward. He and everyone else had to make a lot of effort not to fall down. Mikhail, suffering from motion sickness, even had time to doubt the correctness of his decision to climb onto the grasshopper's back. The sudden sound of a helicopter made him look up. The monster that appeared before him was much more terrible and dangerous than that spider. The bee, with its sting extended, began to aim at the grasshopper's head. At that moment, Mikhail was overcome with real horror and panic. But it all ended before it even began. With one movement, the grasshopper knocked the bee to the ground, and then he was about to eat it, just like the spider. But she bit off one of his paws, freeing herself from his grip. Michael thought this was a good opportunity to sting the bee before it rose, but for some reason the grasshopper hesitated. The hero had a hard time containing his growing irritation at the inability to influence anything. Suddenly an idea came into his mind that he could try to take control of the grasshopper. He immediately opened a portal to Joshua, asking if he could control the bugs. A few minutes later, a man dressed in a protective suit was sitting on the grasshopper's head, holding it by a rope bridle. He didn't know if this plan would work, but he tried his best, relying on his ability. So he managed to make the grasshopper move and even bite off the head of a bee. When this happened, William and everyone else could not hold back their joyful cry. But their joy did not last long. A new, even more dangerous enemy appeared before them. It could have ended really badly if it weren't for Joshua, who managed to get the grasshopper under perfect control. Under his control, they easily got rid of all the enemies that they encountered on their further path. But the grasshopper itself had to be gotten rid of when the heroes reached the point they needed. Bruce did a quick reconnaissance of the area, making sure there were no more monsters left. Now our hero had only one task left: to destroy the gate cores. William decided to take on this mission himself, and thanked Mikhail for all the help he had provided. Without wasting a moment, he prepared for the attack and began to concentrate his power into the sword. His attack caused multiple bolts of lightning to fall to the ground. One of them hit the core directly, destroying it in an instant. Michael was amazed by the power displayed. However, despite all the efforts made, only one of the two open portals disappeared. Suddenly, someone's huge hand appeared from what was left and covered the core of the gate. Trying to understand what the core was protecting, Mikhail tensed up. And soon the monster defender himself, a huge fly, appeared from the portal. The hero immediately opened a portal. He released several dozen sacred spears, aiming at the monster's eyes. The spears hit their target, but immediately bounced back. When this happened, a terrifying guess entered Mikhail's mind. Lancelot confirmed his thoughts, reporting that the level of this fly was higher than all the enemies they had encountered. With each passing moment, horror overcame the hero more and more. He had no idea how to resist such a strong monster. After some thought, he decided that he should attack with all the strength he had. So he opened a portal and released many copies again. All of them, just like before, simply flew away from the fly. On the contrary, this made her angry. Mikhail urgently tried to think of something, but because of the panic, not a single sensible idea came to mind. At one such moment, Lancelot reminded them that if they destroyed the core, the monster would disappear along with it. But to achieve this, they needed to distract the enemy and only then destroy the core. Michael liked this plan, but he didn't know how they would manage to distract the monster. While thinking about what beetles liked, he had an idea. He had previously created an electric insect repellent, so he decided to use that. The monster reacted instantly, bending close to the ground where Mikhail stood. Such closeness to the terrible head of the enemy made the guy freeze with horror. Acting without delay, Lancelot ordered Silas to attack the monster's hand with the core. He rushed towards the target, activating the stealth skill. With one precise swing, he cut through the enemy's last gate core. The monster, fascinated by the device, didn't even pay any attention to it. And with the destruction of the core, it simply evaporated into thin air. Thus, in the battle for Beijing, our heroes won, returning the rights to this territory back to Earth. As soon as Michael realized that it was all over, he fell tiredly to the ground, trying to come to his senses. What happened here convinced him that his enemies would become stronger, and that he himself needed more strong allies. On his return, he approached William with a request, explaining everything. Having asked him for all the available books on martial arts, Mikhail collected all the information from them into one book. Now he asked the swordsman to distribute this book among the people. Soon after, our hero headed to Japan, where he met Gilbert. It was noticeable that the man was very exhausted since their last meeting. But besides his condition, Mikhail was also interested in the stranger sitting next to Gilbert. Elena was a representative of Busan and admitted that she had long wanted to meet the famous representative of Seoul. Together with Gilbert, she filled him in on the details of the battle that was to take place in 7 days between two Japanese cities. Mikhail was perplexed because he saw no point in people attacking their own. Gilbert explained that the government here had been overthrown by a group that worshipped beings from other dimensions. His words made the hero remember the betrayal of the 1st Army Corps of Korea, who planned a coup. To give him a clearer picture of the enemy, Gilbert gave him a photo of one of the members of the enemy community. The guy's confusion became even greater when he tried to understand whether it was a fish or a person. The man continued, saying that the situation was getting worse every day, and yesterday it reached a critical point. Yesterday afternoon, Kaiser, the leader of the fishmen, showed up in Busan and began killing indiscriminately. Elena added that immediately after this incident, they received a notification about the declaration of war, and Gilbert's words about the fact that the number of their armed forces was too small helped the hero understand why the man was so exhausted. Now Mikhail was trying to understand how strong their enemy was in comparison to the beetles in China. He was also worried about the third party with whom the local monsters had united. He knew nothing about it. A look of hope appeared on Gilbert's face as the hero voiced his decision to help them. Mikhail decided to use all the forces they had, and to do this, he needed to know the number of all those awakened at headquarters. Having received the data he needed, he immediately opened the portal and unloaded 200 stacks of books into the office. Afterwards, he explained that these were collections of martial arts brought from China, and they would need to be distributed to the awakened. Having entrusted this matter to Gilbert, he decided to visit his old friend Adam. He handed him a weighty collection, introducing him to the situation. Immediately after that, he returned back to Seoul to see James. The mechanic had been waiting for him to arrive all this time, and admitted that his decision last time was wrong. He was attracted by the guy's strength and the opportunities that were opening up to him, so he easily agreed to cooperate. After this meeting, the hero reflected on the strength of the army he had managed to gather. This number included 200 members of the awakened squad, Adam with his friends, and James. The hero was in no hurry to attract martial artists from Beijing, as they were busy rebuilding their own city. So, while thinking about who else he could call, Mikhail accidentally caught sight of Camelot. This made him remember that he hadn't used any strengthening stones lately. As he expected, Quite a lot of stones had accumulated during this time, so he didn't hesitate to use them all to summon the remaining 12 knights of Camelot. 5 days before the battle began, Gilbert held a meeting to plan the attack. After this, Mikhail's father immediately got to work and built a defensive fortress. James built a ship that would allow him to fight the fishmen on the water. The hero also asked for help from martial arts masters from Beijing, but not everyone was able to leave China, only a few of the strongest, including William. Together they began training the Awakened. But William's help didn't end there. He entrusted the hero with his cloud sword, which had been passed down through generations in his family. Michael was shocked to hear the request to copy such a valuable sword. William explained that he was ready to do everything possible to win. The hero did not object to his request and accepted the sword. Soon after, he visited Alex. He was just busy with his daily training. When they met, Alex told them that he had been hunting monsters, trying to get stones to increase the level of his abilities. But now he had to return, because he lacked the strength to fight the beetles, and his goal remained unachieved. Mikhail promised to help him with the stones in exchange for one request, so Alex joined his troops. During the active preparation for the battle, time flew by unnoticed, and the day X arrived. Thousands of monsters began to rise to the surface from the depths of the water. They announced that they would give the people a chance to survive if they surrendered the Busan representative to them and became subjects of their empire. Although Mikhail noted how eloquent these words sounded, he had no intention of agreeing to these conditions. Soon, the barrier separating their base from the enemies moved aside. The fishmen were delighted that the humans were so stupid as to decide to surrender to them of their own accord. They were about to enter the enemy's territory when a sudden attack from one of the monsters threw one of them back into the water. The Knights of Camelot stood guard at the entrance and were ready to get rid of anyone who tried to get inside. At that moment, one of the fishmen generals emerged from the water, demanding that all his subordinates get out of the way. He intended to show the stunning difference between his strength and that of the knights. But not even a couple of minutes had passed before he was beaten beyond recognition by Arnold. The fishmen did not give up even after their general was defeated because they had another strong general behind them. Here, William entered the battle, cutting through the bodies of several monsters with one blow. Kate fought on the same level as the other masters, getting rid of the monsters. At some point, the second general, Kaiser, also decided to intervene. But like his partner, he was brought down by a single attack and sent back to sea. After this, the fishmen's determination and confidence weakened considerably. Suspecting something was wrong, they all rushed back to the water, believing it was safer there. Mikhail watched their retreat with bewilderment. In comparison to them, the beetles seemed much stronger to him. When all the monsters were far enough from the shore, he opened a portal above them. At that very moment, a huge ship fell into the water. Mikhail decided to follow the trail of monsters to Fukuoka. After 2 hours, he began to get annoyed that they hadn't encountered any other monsters except the fleeing enemy, so he began to wonder if he was being lured into a trap. It was in the midst of such thoughts that he felt the dangerous presence of the monster. He immediately warned Joshua that they had fallen into an enemy trap. At the same time, a giant whale emerged from the water right next to their ship. At first glance, Mikhail put him on the same level as the grasshopper he had met earlier. He was seriously scared when he realized that if this monster reached the city, it would completely destroy it. Therefore, the hero decided to take measures to avoid such a turn of events. Keith howled in pain as several of the released beams pierced his head. Michael intended to attack him again, but to his surprise, this was enough to kill the monster. When the confirmation message appeared, the hero tensed up, trying to figure out if this was part of a strategic trap. He remained in this state of tension for about 20 minutes, waiting for a stronger monster to appear. But no one showed up, and Joshua announced that they had already reached Fukuoka. Instead of joy, this news aroused even more suspicion in Mikhail. As soon as they stepped outside, he immediately discovered the location of his target, the Fukuoka representative. Michael didn't know what traps might await him there, so he decided to send Silas on reconnaissance. With the stealth skill, the knight easily penetrated into enemy territory. There he witnessed a scene where one of the escaped monsters was being scolded by a superior monster. The second one completely refused to believe that anyone could destroy 2 of the strongest generals so easily. There were 2 more people standing nearby with their backs to them. Benedict, the head of the local branch of the Chamber of Commerce, admitted that he had greatly underestimated Korea's power. Standing nearby, Denver already believed that they had lost to Fukuoka, and now he could only take care of the safety of the investment. The cold tone of the leader made him shudder with fear. Benedict did not consider this a defeat at all, and decided to make a more thorough plan for the future. Now he gave the order to lock the representative in the basement, and he himself decided to remove this title hologram at his own discretion. Denver didn't argue with him, and quickly headed towards the monster representative of Fukuoka. He tried to persuade his superiors not to do this, knowing full well that the dangerous monster, the Lord of Hell, was being kept in the basement. but his head was immediately grabbed by a strong hand, depriving him of the ability to speak or even breathe. Denver promised that after killing the Busan representative, he would come and free him. Silas decided not to stay any longer and to return back. After his story about what he saw, Mikhail only confirmed his assumption that it was a full-scale operation. He also didn't understand how a being from another dimension could make the representative's inscription simply disappear. Having no answers to his questions, he decided to focus only on the representative of this city. As soon as he said this out loud, Silas handed him a bunch of keys. At first, Mikhail did not understand why there were so many keys, but as soon as they appeared at the entrance to the basement, all questions disappeared by themselves. Before entering, the hero was worried about the presence of a dangerous monster, the Hell Lord, inside. Deciding to proceed with caution, the two of them went downstairs. Mikhail couldn't help but notice that this place looked more like a hospital than a dungeon. Suddenly Silas stopped and gestured for the hero to do the same. Confused, Michael asked what he was doing, and the knight just nodded silently to the side. Following his gaze, the hero noticed a cage with a man inside. Since this man was not a monster, he decided to try to talk to him and understand what happened. To do this, Silas freed the stranger's mouth from the tape. Mikhail's voice was unfamiliar to him, but the prisoner assumed that he had been sent here from the Restoration Awakening Society. The hero answered honestly that on the contrary, he was going against this very society, which made the two of them allies. Having received the order, Silas immediately freed the boy from the chains. Answering Mikhail's question about what happened, he said that the government was captured by society, and he, out of ignorance, helped them. Then Dmitri said that he used to be an ordinary civilian, but now the monsters call him the Hellish Lord. This name filled the hero with horror and bewilderment. Dmitri noticed his reaction and realized that this name was already familiar to his interlocutor. Still finding it hard to believe, Mikhail admitted that he had heard that the fishmen were afraid of this monster. Trying to understand the situation, the hero suggested that it might be somehow connected with Dmitri's ability. He admitted that this was not his personal strength. Dmitri explained that his ability was to seal the Hell Lord within his body. After this, Mikhail only had more questions. It was difficult for him to even imagine something like this. A little later, over food, Dmitri answered all his questions, noting that his ability also has its side effects. He was also confident that the Hell Lord was the strongest monster in this world, capable of destroying both humans and other monsters. This monster was so powerful that no attack worked on it, and all people could do was pray. The government knew of Dmitri's ability, so they gathered other awakened ones for the sealing operation. So the Hell Lord was successfully sealed, but a problem arose after the end of this mission. The government had long since gone over to the enemy's side and, having gotten rid of the threat, began actively killing the awakened. This is how our Dmitri ended up here. But since he could not die, he received meager nutrients. When Mikhail asked what he was going to do next, the boy admitted that he would break the seal and destroy the government. But he understood that he would be killed faster, and then there would be no one to control the Lord, and Japan would be wiped off the face of the earth. The hero wondered if there was a price to pay. When Dmitri replied that there was nothing like that, except the risk of being killed by monsters, Mikhail immediately came up with a plan. While in the government headquarters, the fishman's attention was drawn to a strange sound outside. The huge building, which was used as a prison basement, began to become covered with deep cracks, and then it exploded altogether. Huge burning debris also hit other houses. Amidst the ensuing chaos, the Hell Lord emerged from the flames, his roar echoing throughout the city. The unbearable heat from the flames caused the water monsters to choke, causing them to clutch their necks. Michael had prudently moved into subspace and was now slowly watching as the Hellish Lord destroyed everything around him. Literally a couple of minutes later, he received a message that the Fukuoka representative had been killed. Having accomplished his goal, he told Dmitri to seal the monster back, promising to keep it safe. He quickly overcame his doubts and decided to trust Mikhail completely. Approaching the portal, he called out loudly to the Hell Lord, activating the seal. At that very moment, everything emanating from the monster began to rapidly be drawn through the portal into the guy's body. The Hell Lord desperately tried to avoid being sealed, even grabbing onto buildings. But the attraction of the seal turned out to be many times stronger. In the end, Dmitri managed to completely seal this monster. The consequences of using such a powerful ability immediately made themselves known. Holding him back, Mikhail thanked the guy for the work he had done. Soon, an excited Joshua ran up to them. Having picked up Dmitri, they headed to the restroom. On the way, the hero told about everything that happened. After his story, Mikhail noted that his friend is no longer even surprised when new people appear in the subspace. At that moment, a message appeared in front of him. He needed to contact the Japanese branch of the Chamber of Commerce to receive the award. It was this message that prompted him to guess how the alien creature had managed to hide the representative's sign. Suddenly his attention was drawn to a worried Joshua. He pointed ahead at the two monsters on the other side of the portal, who had only managed to survive thanks to the strong protective dome. Although Mikhail had not met them before, he assumed that they were representatives of the Chamber of Commerce. Joshua decided to give his friend the opportunity to finish everything here and take on Dmitri himself. Being on the other side, Benedict was able to recreate in his head the whole picture of what happened here and identify the instigator. To correct his past mistake, he gave his subordinate several hundred magic stones, strengthening his power. This time, Benedict hoped to see a more impressive result. Denver had no intention of letting his master down, so he immediately rushed at Mikhail. He didn't even move from his place, summoning his weapon from the portal. Just one moment and the monster was sitting on the ground, bleeding from the spears stuck in his chest. Benedict did not hide his disappointment with him. Mikhail received a large sum of magic stones as an investment. After this, Benedict approached him with a proposal. He suggested that the hero join forces and conquer other countries together, using Korea as their main base. These words plunged his subordinate into complete shock and bewilderment. Benedict even promised full support and stones in exchange for the restoration of his office. Having heard that the office was needed to raise its level, Mikhail became interested. Denver could not listen to this any longer, and took action against Benedict, who had betrayed him. But the spear blade froze in the air, barely reaching its target. The hero immediately guessed that this was the very same repulsion, the protective ability of every living creature. But it was unusually strong, which led Mikhail to think that his enemy was of a very high rank. Pulling the blade away, Benedict apologized and offered to continue their conversation. He had no fears about Denver. His deplorable condition indicated that he was no longer a survivor. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the hero asked what level Benedict was. After thinking, the monster replied that the representatives of the chamber did not have such things. Afterwards, he asked whether Mikhail had made any decision regarding his proposal. The situation was complicated. The hero was asked to change his status from the one whose territory was being invaded to the one who was invading. So he asked for a little time to think about his answer. To give the boy more incentive, Benedict hinted that he could easily find a replacement for him, and the hero should not think that he is special. When the monster compared their abilities with Dmitri, Mikhail realized that the enemy still did not realize what his ability was. Thinking about this, he asked what would happen if he refused. Benedict answered honestly that it would be the end for the guy. He didn't expect to hear a firm refusal at all, so he tried to convince him otherwise. But the hero stood firm on his decision. When the boy returned to the portal, Benedict decided to choose a capable person and deal with him later. Mikhail wanted to deal with the chamber representative with his own hands, but his repulsion ability was too strong. So, once in subspace, he immediately gave the order to the system to save the office behind the monster. At that very moment, the office behind Benedict simply evaporated into thin air. Mikhail mentally rejoiced that the enemy had no idea about his abilities. Benedict barely realized what had happened when his head simply exploded. The hero even froze in shock. He had not expected such a turn of events at all, and did not understand why it had happened at all. Thus both monsters were destroyed, but Mikhail was not happy, because of the office he had saved. He was afraid of losing his own head in the same way. Ultimately, he decided to put the matter aside and return back to Busan to consult with Lancelot. Suddenly he received a message offering a system update, which he definitely couldn't refuse. When our hero returned, Dmitri was shocked at how quickly he was able to figure everything out. Feeling awkward, he thanked Mikhail for his help, and was about to leave the place, citing other matters. He admitted that in Japan they lost 9 out of 10 battles. Inspired by the hero's actions, he decided to spread the news of this victory and gather the rest of the awakened. After listening to him, Mikhail did not try to dissuade the guy, but instead simply invited him to a farewell dinner. Dmitri saw nothing wrong with this proposal, so he agreed. Half an hour later, the guy had regained his strength and was completely full and satisfied. When saying goodbye to him, Mikhail said that he could always turn to him for help. Dmitri also promised to come if the hero still needs the power of the Hellish Lord. During this time, the system update was just completed. To check what exactly had changed, Mikhail immediately entered the subspace. As soon as he moved, the familiar voice of the robot caught his attention. The hero could hardly recognize the updated appearance of the drone. When he suggested getting acquainted with the new functions of the system, Mikhail did not object. The news of the appearance of satellite surveillance within the designated zones made a strong impression on the guy. Also, now the hero could modify and customize holograms. Mikhail was even more pleased with the information that the application for registration in interworld space was approved. After all the changes, the logistics center had become a huge association and now had a 7th level. He decided to immediately take advantage of another of the new opportunities, sending an interdimensional message. The knights dealt with the remaining monsters without difficulty, and now everyone was only waiting for Mikhail to appear. Kate regretted that she hadn't even managed to land a single blow. Suddenly, William joyfully shouted that the system had finally recognized her talent, assigning her level 999. To understand what was happening, the girl looked up, and only then noticed this strange inscription. Although she didn't know all the details, she was sure that it was probably related to her younger brother. It was at this moment that Mikhail appeared. The joy that filled him instantly evaporated as soon as he noticed his sister's murderous aura. But he foresaw this outcome, so he prepared in advance. Arriving on shore, the hero handed her the registration form for the 7th level. Kate studied the document carefully and discovered 2 requirements. The organization must have 50,000 members. It was precisely because of this point that Mikhail still received several slaps from his sister. Neither he nor Kate understood what this clause even meant, so they called in a drone, asking it to explain everything. He said that the system has a function for creating groups. A registered member can no longer join other groups and cannot create his own. Simply put, our heroes will need to gather 5,000 people into their group to fulfill the requirement. Suddenly, Michael remembered something that would help them easily reach this figure. In some areas of the city, there are still monsters like goblins, from which people have to hide. But because of his bleeding wound, which left a mark, Paul was discovered fairly quickly. He had even prepared himself for inevitable death, but suddenly the monster was killed by a sword thrust into his back, and the guy was presented with an offer to join the group. With the upgrade of the entire logistics center, the artificial intelligence of the system has been enhanced. Thanks to this, the system itself can assess the situation and do everything necessary. Michael was full of joy when, thanks to this method, the first person joined him. Having developed a strategy, he decided to start with Busan. After setting up an open portal in Korea, he moved on, but an unexpected problem arose. People began to gather around the portal he had left behind. Having seen everything that was happening with his own eyes, he realized that if more and more people accumulated, the situation would become dangerous. So he asked Gilbert to have the military operate the portals. The man was glad to have the opportunity to help him and saw it as an opportunity to rebuild their nation. Having received his consent to help, the hero listed the cities where he had already managed to install portals. But he didn't take one thing into account: the lack of resources. Gilbert instantly came up with a plan, which he shared with the hero. Returning to Busan, he met with a representative of that city and asked for help in managing the portal zone. He explained the whole situation to her, and the girl also agreed. Thanks to this joint cooperation, they were able to solve the problem of staff shortages, and the situation with the portals returned to normal. The military distributed supplies to people, inviting them to join the hero's group. So in just a couple of days, the number of people in the group reached 40,000. It was at this joyful moment that the drone reported the discovery of a creature from another dimension. Since he had no intention of attacking, the hero decided to face the creature. The ferret tearfully begged to be allowed to stay here because he had nowhere else to go. Before making any decision, the hero decided to listen to the animal's story. Moving to a more comfortable location, Sam explained how his world was destroyed and how he was able to get here. His story made Mikhail think that if they did not have the strength to protect themselves, they would become refugees too. Later, the hero asked if the ferret had arrived here alone. He replied that many of his relatives had died because of the monsters, and the survivors had fled. Having heard that they have an excellent sense of smell, thanks to which they identify the enemy, the hero showed interest. And when Sam said that he could smell a goblin from the 3rd floor of the neighboring building, he was completely surprised. Mikhail decided to immediately check this information and called Silas for this. A couple of minutes later, he returned with the severed head of a goblin. After this, Mikhail could not help but acknowledge the usefulness of the animal. Therefore, the hero invited him to join him, promising to help find surviving friends. When the ferret found out that Mikhail was the leader of the group, he immediately had another request. As it turned out, the animal was the leader of a 10,000 tribe, and now the hero had the opportunity to add them all to his group. He immediately accepted such a favorable offer, and then he informed everyone that the condition of 50,000 group members had been met, and he was able to raise his level. But at the same time, this meant that he needed to find all 10,000 of these animals. This is how their adventure in search of his new friend's lost comrades began. At first, Mikhail decided to use a helicopter to climb the mountain, but dense vegetation did not allow planting, so he had to climb it himself. To secure the way, he called upon Lancelot as a companion. Since they had a long journey ahead of them, Michael expressed his desire to hear the knight's story when he was still a man. The inhabitants of the Avalon dimension had the necessary skills to survive in a wild and dangerous environment. Despite the threat from monsters, they managed to develop civilization. After that, the monsters became less dangerous, but a new test called war appeared for people. The struggle for survival has escalated into a bloody struggle for power and territory. When everyone was already tired of the endless war, a young knight appeared at one point. He managed to stop the war through peace and diplomacy. Soon after, Arthur became king. preaching peace and love to his subjects. He also gave those tainted by robbery and violence a chance, making them knights to defend Avalon. Under their protection, Avalon was able to flourish as never before. But suddenly, this peaceful and calm dimension was faced with another invasion. This time, it was black magicians from the enemy dimension. Their power is unimaginable. Ordinary knights could not put up a proper resistance and became undead, bound by a curse. Lancelot tried not to go into details while telling the story. The memories of what happened were too unpleasant. The hero was surprised that an entire dimension was destroyed so easily. And now, realizing what his knight had to go through, he could hardly find the right words. In some attempt at consolation, he asked if there was any way to save the Avalon dimension. But Lancelot replied that this was impossible, because the Chamber of Commerce did not open the gates to other worlds to anyone except invaders. He also said that it is impossible to bring the dead back to life. The knight understood the hero's state, and admitted that he was glad that his master was not an invader, and that the other knights also appreciated this. Michael certainly didn't expect such words from Lancelot. Suddenly their conversation was interrupted by Sam, who shouted that he could smell his fellow man. Here, in the thick grass, a fluffy tail appeared, and then the animal itself. Both ferrets rushed into each other's arms, rejoicing at this meeting. Sam introduced his rescuers to his friend and told them about the purpose of their journey. He immediately volunteered to help, saying that he knew the location of several more of his relatives. Mikhail was delighted by this news. Thanks to the help of the ferrets they found, they were able to find everyone else. After a week of such searching, our hero was completely exhausted. He had even lost count of how many mountains he had managed to walk around during all this time. To keep the animals safe, he created a portal on one of the mountains, where they could hide in case of danger. Everyone was immensely grateful to him and wanted to somehow repay this kindness. The hero simply asked to help them as best he could, using his sense of smell. Thus, divided into teams, the ferrets helped find and catch the remains of the monsters. Mikhail watched the entire process from subspace, noting that the situation was beginning to improve significantly. But for some reason he couldn't feel the strange, uneasy feeling. At one of these moments, the drone reported that the Chamber of Commerce had issued new documents that the hero could review. Having heard this news, Mikhail was not even surprised. However, the documents he received about the unification of dimensions made him worry. Having mastered only a couple of pages of small text out of 20, he asked the system for a brief summary of the contents. But before that, he gathered everyone else so that everyone could hear this important information. After this, the drone reported that an alien continent would be transported to the Pacific Ocean, which would enter into battle with Korea and Japan. The news of a new battle in 7 days excited everyone. Among all that was said, Emma noticed one important detail. The inhabitants of that continent would be forced to enter into battle. Her words gave the hero hope that in this case, they would be able to resolve the misunderstanding with their opponents and avoid this war. But Lancelot put a damper on this idea, saying that there was no way to contact the people of the continent of Elfhelm. He also feared that the postponement might occur simultaneously with the declaration of battle. Here the drone intervened and reported that Elfhelm had already been transported to the Pacific Ocean, and the battle notification would take place in 7 days. The hero decided not to waste time and immediately go to the Pacific Ocean to talk with the inhabitants of the continent. Emma was worried that they might think differently or be a primitive life form that she couldn't reason with. Mikhail understood all the risks, but did not change his decision.